Welcome to the Bass Pro Shops outdoor world here in Rocklin, California. And also welcome to the 10th anniversary of the Bass Pros. Today, Kevin Van Dam is going to let us on his boat to show you a lesson you can't miss. Then I want to share with you guys a system that has worked for me in proper rod selection in Bass School 101. But first, Stacy King shows us some slow fishing finesse techniques on what to use on those cold winter days. Here comes Fishing in 5.
Oh, yeah. Nice spotted bass right there. I'm just finishing rigging my tackle up to go out and do something I really enjoy doing in the wintertime. You know, we had a cold front move through here last night. It's pretty darn chilly today. Tough time to catch fish, especially on moving baits like a rig or a jerkbait or something like that. So I'm gonna go out and do something I really love doing. I like fishing finesse tackle this time of year. Here's one. Oh yeah, that's a fat one. Nice fat one. You know, I'm using real light heads on these baits and they sink real slow, and I think that's part of the attraction of the fish is the subtle presentation. You know, it really looks like a small crawfish or a small minnow just moving along real slow in that cold water. An old bass, he'll get down there in them rocks and he'll nose around and move those rocks with his nose until he flushes a crawfish out, and then he'll run it down and catch it and eat it. You know, they're aggressive feeders and hunters. They're hunting all the time looking for something to eat. This is a perfect example of the places that I like to fish in the wintertime right here. This bluff comes down and tapers out to a point, and right at the end of this, what we call a bluff end, this is where that channel comes in. The channel's out here in the middle, and it swings right in against this point and goes down this bluff. And those fish love to get in this kind of place and hold right on the end of it. They'll move vertically, and then when the weather starts warming up, they don't have too far to move out on the flat. So they're liable to be concentrated right here, and it's a great place to catch them. There's one. Oh, that's a nice one. Even jumping in this cold water. Pretty largemouth. I use a lot of different stuff, but these are some of my favorites. This little bait right here, it's just like a man's stingray grub. You know, when they just catch a lot of bass in cold water, it's really a good one. And of course, a little old jig like this, just a finesse jig, that's a 1/4 ounce with a little incredible craw or critter craw on the back of it. I catch lots and lots of quality fish on that little jig like that. And this is a Bass Pro teaser tube. I fish that thing with heads anywhere from 1/16 ounce up to a 1/4. This is what we call a Ned rig. It's basically what it is. It's a half a Senko type bait cut in half. I fish that thing with heads 1/16 ounce, and you catch some bass on it. Now some of the guys fish it on as light as 32nd, but tell you what, if you just want to go out and get some bites and catch some fish, try that little worm right there and you'll catch some on it. There's one. Going to the middle. Oh, that's a big old Kentucky there. I mean, a good one. Come on up here, baby. Boy, you talk about a fat chub. He swallowed my bait. Come here. Come on. A pretty spotted bass right there. Oh, you're a pretty fish. One of the real keys to catching these fish on these vertical walls and bluffs this time of year is fishing super slow. With cold water and high pressure, these fish are very lethargic. I'll throw it up on that wall, let it fall vertically until it hits a ledge or a rock, and then I'll just kind of shake it a few times and bring it off and let it fall again. Keep it in pretty close contact with that vertical wall. I like to use a fairly soft tip rod. This is a 7.2 drop shot, medium action drop shot rod. It's a carbon light. It's got a soft tip down about 1/3 of the way, and then it's got good backbone down the rest of the way. And I really have good success setting the hook and landing fish with it. This is advanced braid 8, and I just love it because I can see it good. And the fish don't ever see it because I'm using a 6 to 8 foot section of fluorocarbon leader down there, and so it never gets down to them. But this stuff is so sensitive, I can feel good with it, and I get a good hook set with it. It's low stretch, and it's hard, you just can't break it. Boy, it feels like a good one, but get out from under that boat. Look at that. Pretty large now. I just can't stress enough how slow and patient you have to be with your retrieves when the water's cold and the fish are sluggish.
When 7-time Bass Angler of the Year Kevin Van Dam lets you in his boat, you better take notes. Here's today's In Depth.
There we go. Nice one. You know, one of the things that I love about crankbaits is you can use them to find where the bottom is. You know, using a crankbait allows me to kind of feel my way around. You know, you can kind of feel some of these humps. You know, I'm watching my depth finder, but that's really only helping me see, you know, what's close to me. So I'm kind of mixing it up between, you know, mid-range and deep diving crankbaits just to learn the bottom of the lake. So we'll see what we can find out here. You know, crankbaits have always been one of my best fish finding tools. It's kind of like a depth finder out there away from the boat for me. I love to fish offshore. I want to find those hidden spots and things like that you just can't see with your eyes going down the bank. This way I can fish my way around and find out what the bottom is. You can feel if it's hard or soft. You know, here there's grass, there's clean bottom, there's a little bit of everything. And that's something that just comes with experience over time of just fishing, just learning to feel the subtle bottom changes and things. You know, I'm just trying to figure out what these fish are relating to and what the bulk of them are gonna be hanging on structure-wise. You know, one of the things I try to do with a crankbait is have several different ones tied on so that I can be efficient no matter what depth zone I'm in. You know, you're just basically starting shallow. You know, you start shallow on a point and start working your way out until you lose the bottom. What I really try to do is visualize what that crankbait is hitting out there, both the depth and the type of bottom it is, whether it's grass, hard bottom, or soft bottom. And you feel it, you can tell, you know, with a little bit of practice again, when it's just coming through open water. And then you feel the change in that wobble as it hits the bottom. And you can see how like soft bottom really subdues that wiggle. And hard bottom, you'll feel just, you know, that it's, you know, very sharp. A lot of times, a lot of the wiggles or the deflections when it does hit, you know, some rock or shells or clay, that it's real different than a mud bottom. Good solid fish, just barely got it. Just barely got him. You know, so far, I've had 4 bites and caught 3 bass. 3 of the bites I had were on one big rounding point. This spot right here, you know, there's 2 points that lead into this big slough right here, and you know, it just kind of saddles. It's a little shallower all the way across, and he was kind of right on that transition, right outside of the grass, coming off that rounding point there. One of these places is going to have a bunch of them on it. You can see there's a little bit of grass coming out off the bank though, and you know, a lot of times that's all it'll take. And yep, there's the grass there too. A lot of people don't like throwing crankbaits around grass because you are fighting it a lot. And in here especially, this grass has been growing all summer, and it's got a lot of slime on it and stuff. It fouls your bait up, but boy, I'm going to tell you, it's really worth it because, you know, these fish just haven't seen hard baits like this before. They don't get much pressure. And again, when you're reeling that bait down through there, it's a great way to trigger them. The depth zone that I was really targeting was about 5 to 6 feet where the grass stopped off with the square bill, and then out there deeper, like 8 to 10, even 12 foot with this Series 5. You know, the water was slightly clear and there's a lot of shad around, so I used a Summer Sexy shad in both that 1.5 and a Series 5, and just fishing that key zone out there that the fish seemed to be holding it. I could see the bait on the graph, and that's where these two baits really came into play. You know, I love a square bill crankbait for doing this around shallower areas, and they hit that real, you know, that in between, that shallow to mid-range depth zone real well. You know, now that I'm worked my way out to the end of that grass point and I haven't got any more bites, I want to hit that next zone, and that's where you want to throw your deep diving baits, you know, your round bodied baits. You know, one of the things is when I get down and I feel that wiggle change and it gets down there on the bottom, I just stop and kind of pull it, and then you can watch the rod tip and you really get a really good feel at that point. So you know you're hitting that depth zone. You want to choose a crankbait that runs, you know, a foot or so deeper than the bottom that you're trying to cover. If you can get a lure that runs just a little bit deeper than the water you're fishing, you're going to have the most efficient crankbait for the situation.
Several years ago, Kevin Van Dam won a tournament on the Ohio River, and the fishing was extremely tough. What impressed me so much about that event was how Kevin stuck to his technique. A lot of guys were just catching singles, throwing at targets out on the river. Kevin was able to go and find smallmouth bass out in the current, and what that proved to me was stick to your strengths and have confidence, and nobody has confidence more than Kevin Van Dam.
You know, when I started out, when I first started offshore fishing, looking for structure, you know, type situations in those bass in those places, you know, I used a crankbait to feel my way around, to find how far these points ran out, to feel the different bottom compositions. And that's where the special spots are at. You know, the best places I've ever found are never on a map. They're always some real subtle bottom contour change or some subtle area where the bottom composition changes where the bass really set up. And the great thing is the tools that I use to find those bottom compositions also catch them pretty darn good. There's one. Nice one too. Boy, I mean, he just hammered it. One of the things that I love to do when I'm fishing grass with these baits like this is just, it's really, I kind of really call it worming it through. I mean, it's just a healthy, nice fish, but you know, he was right on this little grass point right here. You know, just cast it out there, reel it down till you hit that grass right there, stop it, shake it a little bit, snap it, and then a lot of times you can just barely just kind of pull it through and just kind of, we call it worming it through there, and boy, they just can't help that. They're looking for something out of that shad that they're looking at or whatever you're trying to imitate with your crankbait. So it's going to be an easy meal. So when you work it through there and pull it free from that grass, they're going to bite it. You know, one thing about this system for me, you know, I love to throw crankbait. I've got Signature Series rods and reel. They're composite, so they got a good mix of glass and graphite. You know, a crankbait reel that has a 5:3 to 1 gear ratio, and that really helps me. Both of those things really help with feel, but one of the #1 things is fluorocarbon line. You know, I use the Bass Pro XPS Signature Series fluorocarbon, and you know, whatever size it is, the fluoro is low in stretch, it's invisible in that clear water, and it's super, super sensitive, so it really, really helps you with the feel. So you gotta have fluorocarbon for your crankbaits. You know, the thing that I've kind of found so far is that, you know, the grass here stops at about 6 foot, and the majority of the bites I've had have been right on that deeper edge of grass, and you know, on a point or the mouth of a cove or something like that. I did have one spot where it was outside a little harder bottom where I had 2 bites, and that tells me that there's got to be more places like that, and that's where the, you know, the mother lode is probably going to be sitting, is a little bit deeper, you know, maybe out in 10, 12 foot of water on a hard spot, you know, a ledge or a ridge or a channel edge or something like that. So we're gonna keep grinding it out and see if we can't find something like that. Those really special places usually are outside the grass, you know, that little deeper ledge, that little deeper drop, that hard spot out there on the flat where the whole school is gonna be at. And that's what I kept looking for. Kind of figuring some things out for sure, but I'm definitely still hoping for that spot, you know, that one spot where you're gonna catch, you know, multiple fish, you know, you hit that school. That's why I spend a lot of time fishing this way, is because, again, just looking at, you know, the shoreline and seeing the obvious points, or looking at the map and seeing obvious points, that's not the spots where I've typically found the mother lode. There he is. I got him here. There's a school there. There's a school there. That fish was, I missed one before this one got it. I think there's a whole bunch there. You know, I threw it out there with my square bill and I wasn't hitting the bottom. So I said, you know what? I'm gonna throw this deeper bait there just so I know I'm getting down to that zone where I can hit the bottom. And that's, I mean, when I got those 2 bites. So let's see here what we got. This spot here is definitely a sleeper, you know, something I just came to the end of this canal where it tees. And normally, I mean, it's always gonna be the corners, you know, of the tee where they're at. There's really, you know, no reason. And they were dead center right in the middle of that canal. And there's probably a little more current there. There's no grass or anything there and out where they're at. They're just hanging out there. When I caught that first good one, I saw right away there was another one following it. And when you have multiple fish like that, you know that you're on one of those spots. You know, I mean, that's what you want to find, is where they're ganged up. That's a big one. Oh yeah. I found the school. He had a whole bunch with him too. Get right back out there again. Oh gosh, I missed another one. Got him. Oh. Now they're just solid bass. You know, when you find a school, you want to get back in there as quick as you can. The clock is ticking. Your window is closing. So it's really important to get back in there quick. God, did you see that? Without a doubt, there's no substitute for electronics, but electronics don't always show you, you know, some of those real subtle features that hold the fish. Feeling your way around with that crankbait and feeling those bottom composition changes, gosh, has led me to some really, really good spots over the years. Oh yeah. This is the spot we were looking for, you know, and I just cannot think of a more efficient way to learn about a body of water. That's a big one. There's a solid 5+ pounder right there. So there's a bunch of them there.
Here's a fast fact for you. You know, I've always been a big bait guy. If I wanted to catch a big bass, I used a big bait, especially when it comes to swim baits. But I gotta tell you, I've recently become converted. I have found out that you can catch a lot of really big bass on small swim baits. I'm talking 2.5 to 3 inch long stuff. These baits can not only save your day under really tough conditions, especially under low wind, but they can help you catch the fish for a lifetime. If you use a small swim bait, small shad imitating bait in the right conditions, it'll help you catch more fish.
Today, I'm going to share with you the system that I use in making proper rod selection in Bass School 101. With all the rods to choose from, it can be intimidating in making the right selection. I'm going to share with you guys some tips on the proper rod length and sensitivity to use on your next purchase. When taking a look at bait cast rods, there's 4 lengths that I use. I use a 6'6", 7 foot, 7'3", and 7'6". We're going to start with the 6'6" and talk about the reasons to make this selection. Anytime you're target fishing, that's throwing around laydowns, corners of boat docks, and you got to be really accurate with your cast, a 6 foot, 6 inch rod is going to be that. Now also, anytime I'm using top water or jerkbaits, when I'm using something that's creating a lot of action, you're going to get a lot of fatigue when you're using a longer rod. Therefore, a shorter rod is going to be better. I like a medium to a medium heavy action, and a softer tip rod is going to allow me to be more accurate on those casts. Also, when you're throwing a jerkbait or top water, that softer tip is going to absorb that action. Now, getting up to the 7 foot and the 7'3", those are really interchangeable. It just depends if a person likes a longer rod or not. We're using both of these applications anytime we're getting out into open water. That's throwing a lipless crankbait like a Shaker Z or a deep diving crankbait, spinnerbaits over big grass flats. Anytime you're making long casts and you're not as concerned about accuracy, that's when a 7 foot or a 7'3" comes in. The actions that I like are a medium up to a heavy action, with a medium heavy being used more than anything else. Now, as we get up to the 7.6, we're really looking at a couple of different things. We're either looking at offshore, deep diving crankbaits, or some people like a lipless crankbait that just like a longer rod. A 7.6 is really going to allow you to load up and make those long casts with a crankbait, and it also is going to allow you to flip and pitch heavy cover. So if you're flipping and pitching heavy cover, go to the heavier actions like heavy or extra heavy, lipless crankbaits, deep diving crankbaits, things of that nature, a softer rod like medium to medium heavy. Hey, those are my tips on selecting the proper rod next time you make your next purchase.
Hello everyone, I'm Ish Monroe. I'm excited about being a part of the Bass Pros this year. The 10th anniversary season is coming your way right now. Today, Tim Horton's taking us to Sweet Home, Alabama. He's using really big lures for really big fish in today's in-depth. Then, Edwin's been tearing it up on the tournament trail. You don't want to miss Edwin today in Bass School 101. But first, Odd Depot shows us how he uses a lipless crankbait to find bass on any given lake. It's today's Fishing in 5.
Windy, think a lipless crankbait. Flat, think lipless crankbait. Lack of cover, think a lipless crankbait. Bait fish, think a lipless crankbait. Oh, there he is. Oh yeah. There, buddy. Stay on the hook, stay on the hook. Man, I knew he was going to do that. He just had that one back hook in his mouth. I knew he was going to flop off. That fish right there is a prime example of the kind of fish you can catch pre-spawn on a lipless crankbait. A lipless crankbait is hands down the most effective tool in your tackle box for covering water, especially in flat areas during the pre-spawn. Little guy. These fish are getting up into places where they're going to be spawning in maybe a month or so. They're not there yet. But it's real flat areas. They're not on steep banks right now. They're back in here on these flats. They're eating shad. A lipless crankbait is the way to catch them. Well, I've been varying my retrieve all morning. I've been reeling the bait along. I paused it, allowed it to sink a little bit. That's when that fish bit. That's something you always want to keep in mind when you're fishing a lipless crankbait. Vary your retrieve a lot. Sometimes you'll find out they want that bait really burned back to the boat. Other times kind of yo-yoing is better. And at times just a regular slow retrieve, slowly crawling that bait along the bottom will be best. Oh yeah, smallmouth. Looky there. Not a bad fish at all. You can tell by how light colored it is, that fish hasn't been shallow very long at all. The conditions we've got right now, we've got very sunny skies. We've only got a little bit of a breeze. Whenever you're fishing a lipless crankbait, it's like any other hard bait, a crankbait, a jerkbait, most any other hard bait. A good breeze really makes this bite a lot better. There we go. He hit it right at the boat. I was reeling that thing along and just wham, right here, right at the boat. A nice largemouth. Oh, he just barely swiped at the bait. Come here. Looky there, that's a nice chunky fish right there. See you, buddy. Whenever you get on fish back in a shallow flat, fishing with a lipless crankbait, a lot of times you're going to get on a school of them. Even in this shallow water, those fish will really get grouped up, and you can put the talons down, hold the boat in one place a lot of times, and catch several real quick. What I'm going to do, I'm going to fish around, I'm going to cover water, move quick. Once I get a bite, I'm going to drop the talons, hold myself in that position, and fan cast to that area. Sometimes you'll find a little drain, a little bitty depression that's holding fish, or a high spot. It could be any kind of depth change that those fish are relating to. You really need to milk those areas over and fish them really well. I've seen it at times where you can catch a whole boatload sitting still in one place in just a few feet of water. This one feels pretty good. Come here, buddy. Yeah, looky there. Found a little group of them back in this flat now. The thing about a lipless crankbait, it is hands down the most effective tool you have for covering water that's extremely flat. You could catch fish on a crankbait, maybe a spinnerbait, a lot of other things. You may catch a few, but when you have wide expanses of very flat water, stuff with very minimal depth change, a lipless crankbait is the best tool for the job. If you've got too much cover around, you're more target oriented, you want something else. Places where it's about making very long casts, fish in water that's a pretty relatively the same depth, a lipless crankbait, that's your best tool. You can see the cover that I'm fishing is all pretty flat and really very featureless. There's small rock, some mud mixed in, and that's what makes a lipless crankbait very effective in this situation. There's not a lot of stuff to deflect a normal style crankbait off of, but with this lipless crankbait, I'm throwing it out there. It's staying in contact with the bottom probably 75% of the retrieve. Just near the boat is the only place that it's getting off the bottom, and that's where those fish are at. They're up real shallow on these flat, featureless banks. The lipless crankbait is burning right through there, and those fish are biting it. The things that make a lipless crankbait so effective, number one is its profile and its size. It's the right size for bait fish this early in the year. Number two is the thinness of it. That makes it have a real tight vibration. These fish want a bait with a very tight vibration to it. That's what this has. Last, the color and the flash. This thing flashes in the water just like those threadfin shad do. And that profile with the bait dot on the side, it's exactly what those fish want.
Have you ever noticed that bass will attack and eat something way bigger than they are? Well, Tim Horton's here to show us which big lures he uses for big fish in today's In-Depth.
These big lures are trending all over the country. It started last summer with these big flutter spoons, and it's continued with these big, huge, oversized deep diving crankbaits. I mean, look at the size of this lure compared to deep diving crankbaits we fished in the past. What's happening is these tournaments are getting won on these lures, big oversized worms, big swim baits. And when you start seeing things happen on the tournament trail, when these guys get out and they're competing for a living and it's what they do, they're gonna do what they think they can do to win events. When you go see events won on these big lures, it starts happening with sales. You'll go into an aisle at Bass Pro Shops and you're gonna see these big lures all along the aisles, and it's really, really trending right now. Oh yeah. Feels like a good one. Oh yeah, that is a good one. Oh, you got a mouthful of them too. Oh yeah, that is a good one right there. Things are trending all over the country with bigger lures and bigger bass. There's something about it. Oh yeah. You know, getting confidence. You know, in a big lure like this, whether it's a big swim bait, a big worm, we're gonna talk about all of that. Having confidence, big fish feed on big lures. There we go. Oh yeah. Oh, that's good. Throw my big worm off. I want to show you guys something that is so cool. Of course, this is a 7/0 hook. Let me get this worm straightened back out a little bit here. Look at that compared to that bass. Bass is about 2 inches longer. I mean, that's a solid 2 3/4, but that's a big worm it ate. You know, talking about big lures, big worms are no exception. 18 inches, big green pumpkin worm, 7/0 hook, 3/4 ounce weight. What we're doing, we're showing these fish something really big. What happens with that, you've got these big schools and you got all these little fish in there too. You want to eliminate those strikes so that those big fish will hone in and find that lure. And when they see that right there, they're not going to turn it down. Several years ago, drop shotting, all of that finesse, little bitty worms got to be really popular. And that does work on lakes where you get a lot of pressure. But you take lakes that have what I call good water clarity to them. That's Pickwick Lake, Grand Lake, up around Cape Fair on Table Rock. Where you find stained water like what we have here, bigger is better. You're gonna catch more fish and you're gonna catch bigger fish. And if you're competing in tournaments, I don't care if it's a weekend level, a high school event, you're only gonna be able to weigh in 5. You better have 5 big ones. There we go. Oh, that's a good one. And this tells you, you know, a bass, even how aggressive they are. I mean, this fish is, you know, not as big as that last one. You know, still a nice bass, as he throws my worm off there. But
Now, that's a big 7/0 hook, 3/4 ounce Bass Pro Shops tungsten weight with that big worm. I'm gonna show you guys a lure. This is actually a lobster, called a lobster, but it's actually a big crayfish. If you go to places like Table Rock, Lake of the Ozarks, Smith Mountain Lake in Virginia, you'll find crawfish in your live well after a day of fishing, sometimes this size. And I can take this lure and throw it on a 5+ bedding fish, and you'll get 10 times the reaction you will with a small crawl. And that just goes to show you how much those fish will keen on it. I can fish something like a crawsome or something like that, which is a 3-inch crawl. Thought I had a bite there. Oh, yeah, let's catch this fish first. There we go. As I got interrupted. But you can take a lure like that big crawl, and it completely changes a fish's mentality. You know, when you're actually looking at a fish and you're trying to catch them and you're visually looking at those bass and you see how they react to lures, it shows you what happens by throwing a big lure in there. You know, we also have the big swim baits that's really happening all throughout the country. Big is better. Go big or go home, I guarantee you. When fishing this big worm, you don't want to use a lightweight because it's taking up a lot of water as it's falling down and dispersing through the water column. Therefore, we're using a 3/4 ounce weight and basically just throwing it out to where I feel like the school of fish is, letting it get to the bottom and then popping that thing through. It's more or less dragging it with a couple of pops every now and then. The Tennessee River, along with a lot of other lakes, has a lot of lamprey in them. You'll see them throughout these lakes. You'll see them connected to these bass sometimes as you bring them in. And that's what these fish think they're feeding on, is these big lampreys and also possibly some snakes that may be in the water as well. But these bass are feeding on these lampreys, and that's what this big worm is imitating.
Folks, let me tell you, California, we innovated the phrase, you better go big or you go home. We like throwing big baits. We're talking 10 to 15-inch swim baits. We're talking 10 to 15-inch worms. I'm even talking about an 8-inch tube. Those are all big baits thrown on big rods and big line. I even won a tournament one time with only a few minutes to go using an 8-inch tube, catching an 8-pound bass. I won that tournament. So you better go big or you better go home.
You can go to Clear Lake in California, the California Delta. You can go to Falcon Lake in Texas, Lake Seminole, Lake Eufaula, Lake Okeechobee, Lake Chickamauga, all the Tennessee River, and you're going to find all of the anglers are fishing with oversized lures and having some of the best success they've ever had. You know, these fish may be 50 yards one way or the other from where they were, and they get on these big groups of shad and they just move, you know, and you got to get down and relocate them. You know, what we're looking for, there's just some hard places out here. You can see we're coming up on these rises, and where the current hits them upstream is always going to be the deal. So you just get on these places where the current washes in. You know, this morning we got very little generation going on. What do we mean? Pigwick Lake is a power generating lake. When they're not generating, the fishing can be a little bit slower. And when they turn the water on, it really heats up. You know, it's kind of like Pavlov's dog, you know, ringing the bell. You know, his mouth starts salivating, everything else. These bass get conditioned to that. When it's still, they're just in a dormant state. When that current comes on, they know to feed. So I think on lakes like this, it has more to do with it than moon phases, feeding times, or anything else. These fish are conditioned as to when to eat every day. What I like to do is throw this marker out and know my exact cast. You know, if I'm fishing a long ledge where the spot is not as specific, I'll just use the waypoints on my unit. But if I want to get really specific with it, I like to put a marker buoy out. What we've got right here, you know, we just graphed using the Ray Marine, and we went over a school of bass. It's just a slow taper. It goes from about, I don't know, 14 down to about 18. And right there on that drop, it's really rough, and that's where that school is setting. And we're bringing that big worm through there, getting their attention, and they're jumping on it. There we go. Oh, yeah. That is so cool. Going over them with that Ray Marine and then throw in there and catch them. Nice. He's had something pop him on the tail before. Turtle or something. Sweet. Hey, taking a look at some of our gear, you gotta have the right tackle when you're throwing really big lures. This is a Z-Boss 25, and let's face it, this is a 2-ounce crankbait. You gotta have a rod that's gonna load up. Don't get a 6-foot or a 6.6 rod. This is a 7.3 Ducket White Ice Timmy Horton Signature Series medium heavy action rod. It's paired with a BB1 loose reel, 14-pound Sunline fluorocarbon. Now on the big spoon, this is almost flipping tackle. Look at the size of that spoon. You're talking an 11-inch spoon, 6:4-to-1 gear ratio, 7.6 heavy action. This is my flipping rod, Micro Magic Pro. Works great. You gotta have the right tackle. Now I'm gonna take you guys through a fishing scenario. Let's say we've got the spoon, but what I like to do is just make a cast out to where I feel like the fish are. Now, as this lure goes to the bottom, it's gonna get down really quickly. This is a heavy spoon. As it gets down, I'm gonna reel it up and pop it off the bottom. That's gonna bring it up 3 to 4 foot off the surface, and then it's gonna flutter back down. When it hits the bottom, I'm gonna let it sit there a second or two and do the whole scenario again. 16-pound test fluorocarbon shooter Sunline again on that as well. Now on the big deep diving crankbaits, you've got to have line capacity. You got to have a reel that's going to hold a lot of line so that when you make that long cast, there's nothing more important. I want to get this bait down there 16, 18, 22 feet on some places. You got to make that long cast, get it coming back in. When this lure comes through the schools, you're going to trigger those strikes. But the biggest thing is big lures, whether it's the big worm, the big spoon, or the big crankbait, is gonna catch big fish. You know, don't be intimidated, because as you've seen today, we caught fish that were in the 2-pound range on the big worm. Same thing on the crankbait. Don't be afraid that it's gonna intimidate those fish. They're gonna bite anyway, and you're gonna catch bigger fish. Nothing, you know, any different than throwing a big worm or a jig. Just throw into that spot, except this is gonna be more of a vertical drop down on top of them. And then once it gets down there to where they are, it's just ripping it off the bottom and letting it fall back down. This spoon really goes down quick. Here's a bump. No? Yeah, it is. There we go. Man, that's a heavy one right there. I mean, look at this smallmouth right here. And I've caught tons of giants on this lure before. Don't you jump, don't you jump. Sweet. Look at that right there. That is so cool. A bigger fish, say a 5+. It's not gonna wanna eat a lot of meals each day. It's almost like, take the biggest predator in our country, wolves and coyotes. You know, they're not gonna eat just little bitty stuff all day long. They're not gonna catch little bitty rodents. They're more or less gonna look for bigger meals that the whole group can eat on. It's the same thing when you're out bass fishing. Take big lures and you're gonna catch bigger fish. When that lure's down there in the strike zone, big worms, big crankbaits, big spoons, it doesn't matter what it is. It's trending in our sport right now. It's trending because tournaments are getting one on them. Get you some big lures, you're gonna catch some giant bass. Sweet.
Hey, one of the things that I learned when I'm fishing a frog is that if I trim the legs and trim one of them about a 1/4 inch shorter than the other, it really helps it walk. And when you're fishing a frog in open water, you want that bait to walk back and forth. That way when you make the cast out there and you pop it, you know, it's gonna really go side to side. It throws it out of balance and gives it that great action, and that's what the bass want.
When Ed Nevers finished college, he went right into bass fishing. That's when the real education began. What's he learned in 15 years? Let's find out in Bass School 101.
Spinning rod is a great tool to have, but you know, sometimes the things can just really frustrate. You get big bird nests that come off of them. A lot of little things can happen wrong with them, and they can be very, very frustrating. So many people, when they cast out a spinning rod and reel, they want to engage the bail by handle right there, by doing that right there. And what that does is it puts a 1.5 twists every time you engage the bail by hand. What I mean is they just take the handle and it engages that way. So one of the things I found is always flip the bail back over by hand manually, and then as soon as you do that, just giving that a quick tug. That's gonna pull that line tight down in the spool and make sure there wasn't any fluff or just a little loose piece, because if there's a little loose piece, the next time you cast, that's when you get that craziness that'll come out of there. So when you cast it out there, flip the bail over by hand and give it a quick little tug, and those will really help cut down all that craziness that'll come out that reel. I really like braid on my spinning reel. It really helps cut down a lot of those twists. I use the Bass Pro XL 12 or 15 pound braid. It really, the whole twist issue is not a factor with that braid. It doesn't give you near the trouble that fluorocarbon does, but there's times that you really want to use fluorocarbon, and I still do a lot. But the best thing I found to eliminate all those twists of once you've reeled it on is to walk it across your yard, maybe have your kid walk it across your yard, or put it, you know, put your boat in gear and just let all that line back off, you know, 50, 100 yards, however far you're gonna be casting, and then just pinch your line right there, reel it back, and that allows all those twists when you're putting that line on to come out. It may be one of those things, you know, sometime throughout the day, if you're starting to notice you get a lot of twists right here in your line, to cut your lure off, put your trolling motor on high, and just let a bunch of line out, and then reel it back up with your fingers and pinching it really tight. That'll get all those twists out, and you can make longer casts by far, you know, having a really good smooth line on there. Spinning rod and reel is a great tool to have. They can be a headache. I hope some of these tips will help you prevent some of those twists and craziness that'll happen.
Welcome to Bass Pro Shop's Outdoor World here in Rockland, California. We've got a great show lined up today, so let's get right to it. Today, Art Defoe shows us a finesse technique that he calls tightlining. It's a great way to catch them right before the spawn. You don't want to miss today's in-depth. Then, newcomer to the Bass Pros, Ish Monroe shows us how easy it is to use today's inflatable devices on Bass School 101. But first up, we asked Davey Height what are his 3 favorite soft plastic lures. He shows us right here in today's Fishing in 5.
Okay, I'm about to show you 3 lures that you can't leave home without. Number 1, a Senko. Number 2, a soft plastic swim bait. And number 3, a plastic jig trailer. You gotta have those 3. The Senko is a black blue flake 7-inch Yamamoto Senko. You know, number 1, the Senko. It's a finesse, but catch big fish bait. You know, it's a very subtle action, doesn't move a lot of water, doesn't vibrate a lot, but gets you a lot of strikes when the fish really aren't aggressive. And that's a nice chunky tournament fish there, no doubt. See you, buddy. You know, I caught that on a 7-inch Senko, a nice, you know, 3.5 pound fish. You know, I like a Senko throughout the year, everywhere I go, from north to south, east to west. The 7-inch Senko is obviously a bigger bait, seems to get you a little bit bigger bite, so I like to throw it a lot. This is a 7-inch, and I use a belly weight. I fish a Senko every way you can imagine. Texas rig, wacky style, weightless, with the weight, you know, all different ways, but this is something I do a little different than a lot of people. I actually use a belly weight with this hook. So it actually lets the bait glide and swim down instead of falling vertically. It gives it that horizontal swimming action with that belly weight. Rather than a Texas rig, it goes more straight down also. Another thing that I do with this Senko with this belly weight in it that I don't do when I'm fishing it weightless. Typically when I'm fishing it weightless, I throw it to a specific target, let it fall down with that great Senko action, reel it in and make another cast. But with this belly weight, because it swims so well, I'll cast it out, let it make that initial fall, and then I'll pick my rod up and let it do it again and make a couple little lifts and let the bait fall back. Number 2, a swim bait. The swim bait I like to use is a Yamamoto Hardtail 5-inch swim bait. I can emulate shad, bluegill, any type bait fish. We have the different colors in the swim baits, and it's really cool. You can fish it from really up high, right on, basically on the surface, all the way down to the bottom. You gotta have a swim bait. You know, that's a good keeper tournament fish. I've seen the day when I'd sure take 5 of those, but you know, hopefully we'll catch a few bigger ones. Swim bait, soft plastics, good swim bait fish there. Oh, buddy. swim bait has become one of my favorite lures. They've really evolved over the last 10 years. This is Yamamoto Hardtail. It's a great soft plastic swim bait. It's got really good action. It's a soft plastic, ultra soft plastic in this bait. But I like to use this weighted hook with this pin in the front because you have a lot of plastic here. And if you don't have the pin where that hook can come through, and see, I end up with this when I hook a fish, and you'll land so many more of those fish. But if you just Texas rig it, I'm gonna do this real quick to get the point across. If you Texas rig a swim bait like that and you miss a fish or lose a fish, a lot of times you'll reel in this. And you see you've got your hook totally covered and you can't hook those fish. Try a weighted swim bait hook with a screw-like front on here like this so your hook can come through and you'll catch a lot more of your fish. There's one. The jig I'm using is a 1/2 ounce mop jig with a Yamamoto Frog trailer. Blow in there, buddy. Let me get my frog. This is probably my favorite. I actually put it on a jig and a crawfish type trailer. It's something that's won me a whole lot of money all over the country. You know, this is a Yamamoto Frog I'm actually using as a jig trailer. But you know, a jig and a piece of soft plastic, not the old days where we used pork, but soft plastic. The colors are good, the action's really good. Catch a lot of really big fish. Probably my favorite way to fish is with a jig and soft plastic. Oh God! Wait. Oh, wait. Big one. Oh, strong one too. I'm beared down with 20-pound test on this fish. Yeah, that's what we're looking for. That's the one that wins your tournaments right there. And that's the hook that I talked about. The Cinco went away. That's when it all comes together right there, baby. Woo! You know, catching a 7-pounder never gets old. It's got my heart rate really going. Those 3 baits that I've used today, the Cinco, the swim bait, and then the plastic jig trailer. If you carry those 3 soft plastics with you anywhere in the country, I guarantee you it'll help you catch more and bigger fish. That's fun.
Catching bass during the pre-spawn can be very challenging. Today, Art Defoe shows us a finesse technique that can pay off in a big way. Let's go in depth.
It didn't take too long this morning. You just spit up a shad right there too. Just about the size of the little minnow I'm using. Come on up here, smallmouth. There we go. I had let that bait fall just a little bit deeper. I'd been hitting a few rocks and swimming out, felt it drop off of them and let it drop back down. That fish nailed it. It's a beautiful fish. See you, buddy. That's a prime example of what fishing a bait with very little action can do for you, especially on a day like today, a day when it's flat calm, hardly any wind whatsoever. A crankbait would be a great bait in this situation if we had some wind due to the water temperature, those kind of things. But with these really still conditions, a bait that I have to put the action into, it's a very simple, very standard, very natural looking bait. That's the key to catching these fish today. As you can see, this is a very featureless bank. It really doesn't have any defined points, no real structure, no cover really on the bank, no real rock transitions, anything like that. But that's the kind of place where tightline will put fish in the boat that a lot of other techniques won't. If you're fishing a crankbait, a jerkbait, a swim bait, you're always wanting to be somewhat target oriented, at least fishing around a point or some type of depth change. With tightlining, you really don't have to have any of that. You can go down a straight featureless bank and catch fish that you really wouldn't have been able to with any other technique. That's the kind of places that tightlining will put more fish in your boat. Tightlining, the best way to explain to you what it is the most finesse swim bait fishing you'll ever do. It's more finesse even than swimming a grub due to the fact that the bait has no built-in action. It doesn't have a curly tail, doesn't have a boot tail, just a straight, natural minnow shape to it that you have to put the action into yourself by shaking that rod tip as you're slowly winding it along. The key to getting those strikes whenever you stop the bait is to not give the bait slack. If you give it slack, that bait wants to fall straight down to the bottom. If you just stop reeling, hold the rod tip steady, it allows that bait to swing down, a much more natural presentation. That's the way you'll get more bites. We're out here, it's late March. You know, this morning it was in the 40s, low 40s whenever we got out on the water. It was quite chilly. You need a couple extra layers on. It's going to get up in the 70s this afternoon, so that's the kind of time of year when a technique like this, it'll work daylight to dark. You just got to dress accordingly. That fish really thumped it hard way out on the end of the cast. This feels like a pretty good one. Oh yeah, that was awesome right there. Stay on there, fish, don't act too crazy. Yeah, look at that pretty thing. Yeah, look at that pretty smallmouth. He ate that minnow right out on the end of that cast, and I mean, he thumped it too. There was no doubt whenever that fish bit. Tightlining, we've got out here. The wind started to pick up just a little bit today. It's not bad at all by any means, just getting a ripple on the water. We're trying to stay out of the real hard wind. This fish was right here with just a little bit of breeze blowing across this point. The wind's kind of picked up a little bit during the day today. This morning it was really flat calm. The wind started to pick up a little bit this afternoon. Tightlining will work in the wind as long as it doesn't get to be too much. If this wind gets to be too heavy today, we may have to change up a little bit. If we can stay out of it and continue to get bit, we'll keep catching them tightlining. I've been tightlining the Gulp minnow all morning. Just wait till you see what happens when we add a paddle tail to the equation.
Hey, I've had a lot of experience catching smallmouth bass in the pre-spawn growing up in North Alabama. In particular, Pitwick and Wilson Lake are known for trophy smallmouth, but I'm going to tell you, when that water's cold, it can be very tough to catch them. You take two situations, smallmouth bass in cold water, what does that tell me? Finesse lures, that's where I'm going to start every time. It's a technique that will not fail.
What we're doing out here this morning, the water's in the low 50s. It's still pre-spawn though. The water temperature in this lake I'm fishing right now, just a couple weeks ago, was down in the low 40s. So these fish are still very much in a late winter pre-spawn type pattern. The key to getting a lot of bites out here right now is fishing a very small bait. You can tell it's high skies, bright sunny conditions. We do have a little bit of wind out here on the water, but you have to fish a very natural bait. These fish are feeding on 2 to 3 inch long shad. We're fishing 2 different bait types that imitate both of those sizes of bait fish extremely well. Oh yeah, he's about to whip me. I don't know if he even knows his hook yet, he's so big. This feels like a great big one. Come on up here, let me get a look at you. Oh man. Yeah, look at that one. Golly, what a pretty small wow. Come here, buddy, come here. Look at that thing. Come here, open your mouth. Open your mouth. There we go, look at that fish. That is a pretty smallmouth. I want you to look at something right here. We've made a little bit of a bait change. See that? That is a paddle tail. We've been throwing the Berkeley Gulp minnow all morning this morning, tightlining, and this wind's gotten up to the point now to where the tightlining, the straight tail bait isn't being quite as effective. Switch to a Berkeley ripple shad power bait, the little bitty boot tail on it, and that's the results right there. Beautiful smallmouth. Once you get a certain amount of wind, and you can tell the boat's rocking and stuff right now, we've got a good 10-mile-an-hour breeze blowing out here. That straight tail minnow, to me, it gets lost in those waves, in that disturbance, where this little bitty boot tail has just enough action, just enough vibration for those fish to find it, seek it out, and come eat it. Still the same length profile, it's a 3-inch bait, still the same exact 1/8 ounce VMC jig head, but just a little bit of action, just that little bit of tail kick is all those fish need in this clear water to be able to come find it and bite it. This is a point that sticks way out into the lake. The lake really kind of bottlenecks down here a little bit, and the more prominent a point is during the pre-spawn, especially whenever the wind is blowing, the better it's going to be. Those points that are, you wouldn't really call them secondary points, they're still main lake because they're on the main body of water, but they just don't stick out as far. When the wind's blowing, there's a point that's catching the most wind, those are the points that you want to be focused on. This afternoon has really contrasted quite a bit from what it was this morning. We had really bluebird skies, no wind whatsoever. Now this afternoon we've got a few scattered clouds around, definitely a good bit of wind, so a lot different than what we started out with. I'd reeled that little swim bait out a long ways and stopped it, and it was falling, and this fish smoked it. I mean, he smoked it. Come on up here, buddy. That fish thumped it like it was thumping a jig. It doesn't get any cooler than that. 6-pound test line, 3-inch swim bait, little bitty, just a little bitty thing. Look at it, ain't even much bigger than his eyeball. That's as cool as it gets. That fish there was a prime example. They seem to be holding just a little bit deeper than what I was expecting. 10 to 12 feet seem to be where most of my bites are coming from. If I had a couple as deep as 15 today, I really expected them to be a little bit shallower. But on the points and the way these fish are set up, a few of them have come off of banks, but most of them are coming around some type of an obvious main lake style point. And those fish are going to be set up close to the bottom. They're going to be within a couple feet off the bottom. You'll occasionally see a fish suspended higher on the electronics, but the fish that I'm fishing for are within a couple feet of the bottom, and that's where I'm having to keep my bait. If I'm reeling it along and if I'm 5 or 10 feet over top of the bottom, regardless of the depth, I'm not getting any bites. I have to have that bait within 3 feet of the bottom or so to be able to get bit. The rod and reel setup I'm using for both of these baits today is basically exactly the same. One is a little bit different model than the other, but just so you know, they're basically exactly the same setup. They're a 6-foot, 8-inch, medium fast action rod. And you want a rod that has a little bit of backbone to it, but not so much that it makes it difficult to throw this very lightweight bait. And also you want to have a rod that's light enough that you're not going to break the line fighting these fish on such a light line as 6-pound test. The reel is a 5-2 to 1 gear ratio reel. This is a Pfluger Patriarch spinning reel. On this, I've got 6-pound test Berkley Trilene XL fluorocarbon. That stuff is so thin, that fluorocarbon is completely invisible to the fish. Very important. I could throw this further if I fished it on braid with a leader, but I like the action on both Tightlining and the swim bait of straight fluorocarbon. You don't overwork the bait having straight fluorocarbon line like you could if you use braid with a leader. The jig head for both presentations, an 1/8 ounce VMC Moon Eye jig head. It's got those big eyeballs on the side. I know that helps those fish whenever they get close enough to it. They see those eyes, just makes it that much more natural looking. On the swim bait was a 3-inch Berkley Power Bait Ripple Shad swim bait, and this is an olive green back color one. On the Gulp Minnow, same jig head, a 3-inch Gulp Watermelon Pearl Minnow is what that bait's called. So that's the two setups I use. Rod and reel the same for both, line the same for both, reel the same for both, jig head the same for both. The only difference is just the bait. This feels like a pretty good one. Oh yeah. He had to clear the water there a little bit, give a show. Oh yeah, looky there. That's a nice one. Man, these fish are so much fun to catch. Yeah, look at that. Just another beautiful, beautiful chunky smallmouth. Man, early spring, coming out of the winter time, it's just now started to warm up. The water's in the low 50s. There's really no better way to catch these fish right now than a finesse technique. Tightlining the Gulp Minnow, fishing this 3-inch power bait, Ripple Shad, 1/8 ounce jig head. Man, there's just no better way to catch these fish right now. They're not quite to where they want to be in a couple weeks when they'll be spawning. This will catch them right now.
I love to fish fast, so I love high-speed reels like this Quantum Smoke Speed Freak. It has an 8:1 gear ratio. Mainly what I like a high-speed reel for though is those techniques that you're moving the bait with your rod and you're just using the reel to pick up slack. So top waters, jerkbaits, you move the lure with your rod and you use the reel to pick up slack. Another thing that's real important, if you're fishing targets, you pitch out there, you fish the target. Once it's out of the strike zone, you can burn it in real quick and make more presentations. A high-speed reel makes you a lot more fishing on the water.
Some of the new technology that's available to anglers today has nothing to do with fishing. Ish Monroe shows us also how advancements in technology can save a life in Bass School 101.
As a professional angler, I have a lot of different items in my boat, but the most important item is my PFD, personal flotation device. I actually carry both types in my boat. I have the standard type that has the foam in it, but I also carry the inflatable type. I've got a couple of things I want to show you that might just save your life. When you're using the inflatable type life vest, first thing that you want to check for, which is very important, is to make sure it's a Type 3 Coast Guard approved life vest. Very important when you're out there boating on the water. Next, you want to check your indicator to see if it's armed. Red means stop, green means go. If the indicator's red, you might want to check your CO2 cartridge. If there's a CO2 cartridge in there, it definitely needs to be replaced. But if not one in there, you want to take CO2 cartridge, insert it in the indicator, twist it, and it turns green. Once the indicator is green and ready to go, you're pretty much armed and ready to get out on the water. But you have to put it on first. Roll it over your shoulders like so. Clip the strap. You want to make sure that it's snug around you, maybe by pulling the strap, but you don't want it too loose because if you end up in the water, it's going to roll right over your head. It also has a sensor in it that it can also automatically inflate, or if you want to, you can manually inflate it by pulling on this strap right here. Now, obviously, you're in the water. This is what it's going to look like. Let's just say you're unconscious. It has a support system here to hold your head up so that you can still breathe. And if you need to manually inflate it, you have this tube right here. Folks, let me tell you, you need to read the rules and regulations for each state that you're in, because children under a certain age must wear one all the time when you're out there boating. But I suggest that you wear one anytime you're out on the water boating, because it might just save your life and you'll definitely have a lot more fun.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the massive Bass Pro Shops at the Pyramid in Memphis, Tennessee. Today, Ish Monroe is going to explain to us why the water in the California Delta is so precious, not only to giant bass and great bass fishermen, but to agricultural as well. Don't miss today's in-depth. You know how all pros can skip baits way under the docks? Man, Randy Howell is going to teach us how he does it in Bass School 101. But first, here's Edwin Evers to teach us about fishing submerged grass. When you find them, you find big ones and lots of them. Here's Fishing in 5.
One of the best fish holding pieces of cover or structure in any lake all across the country is grass. You've got both inside and outside grass lines. The inside grass lines where it stops growing and going up towards the shore, then like where I'm sitting right here is the outside grass line. And as the water gets deeper, the grass only can grow so far, so deep out there. Fish relate to the grass lines because it's just like a highway. It's like a highway that we drive up and down. That grass line's like a highway to those fish. It's a pathway that they can pull into the grass and feel comfortable, feel safe. And so it's just a natural piece of cover that gives shade and great ambush points for fish to feed. I want to make sure when I get a bite that I know exactly what kind of grass that fish was holding in. You know, a lot of these lakes have multiple types of grass, so it's important to visually see or look at or hook some of that grass where you got that bite to see what kind of grass it is so you can duplicate it the rest of the day. One of the things I really like to find is where that grass, that outside edge, comes into a really deep section of the lake. You know, if you've got a channel swing or somewhere where it's really deep and that grass grows out right to that deep break, those can be your key spots that you're looking for. You can see the grass comes right down through there and then it turns and makes a point right there. And right there on that point's where those fish are. You can see them hanging right there on that break. Right on that outside grass line. That's a good sign too, because that's right when that thing hit the bottom. When I start out fishing grass lines, I like to look for the deepest water right up to the next to the outside grass line. That's the prime example. I've got 40 foot right here, really close to this grass line that's 10 to 12 feet. It's a big old largemouth. Look at that fish. Oh, there's a bunch of them down there. Come here, buddy. Come here. Oh, yeah. The man. Oh, looky there. Man, there was a bunch of them down there and they were giant. It's a nice one. He's been caught before. Good example of catch and release right there. I really like when I'm fishing grass lines to try to keep my bait in that strike zone as long as possible. I'm gonna try to position that boat right on the break or the depth that I'm getting my bite. That's really critical, so really pay attention to it. I like to fish parallel to that. I want to be keeping my bait in that strike zone as long as possible, whatever depth that is at that outside grass where you're getting those bites. Fish it parallel and really pay attention to make sure you're going to cover those irregularities, those little points, those little subtle things. That's where those key spots can be. It seems like when you find them on a grass line, you can catch a lot of fish right in a really, really close area. Come on out. I'm in the grass. Still on there. Oh, another big largemouth fish. They're getting bigger. Oh yeah, nice one. Look at that fish. Man, that's fun. Wind is always your friend anywhere you're fishing, and especially with grass lines. You know, you can have wind push a lot of bait fish up into a grass line. You can have wind breaking up the surface when you're on clear bodies of water. So I'm always going to chase the wind. Today I don't have any wind, so it's kind of dictating me fishing with spinning rods. But you know, if I had a lot of wind out here today, I'd be throwing a crankbait, a jerkbait, maybe a spinnerbait over these outside grass lines. There's a fish right there. Oh, that's a big one. Golly, they pull hard. Big old smallmouth. Come on, fish, get up here. They pull so hard. I'm fishing outside grass lines right now. It's where I found these fish. And it just happens to be that a drop shot seems to be working the best. It's odd that fish never jumped. They always do jumpers. Come here, buddy. Got it. I got that one. It's a nice one. Today I've got really calm conditions. You know, I'd love to be throwing a crankbait or jerkbait or something like that, but with these really calm conditions, you know, you've got a couple choices, drop shot or top water. So far today, everything's been right here on this drop shot.
You know, the California Delta has been stressed with a 4-year drought. It's affected agricultural, drinking water, and one of America's best fisheries. Ish Monroe's here to show us the California Delta. It's today's In Depth.
Today, I want to show you how I fish the Delta and the different types of grass that are here and how I would approach each different types of grass out here on the California Delta. If you've never been to the Delta, it's pretty overwhelming. You're looking at 1,100 square miles of waterway, and that makes things complicated because you don't really know where to start. Well, the great part about the Delta is you can pretty much drop the trolling motor wherever you decide to launch at and go fishing. So the Delta's phenomenal. You can come out here, find a launch ramp, drop the boat, and pretty much fish for whatever you want. I mean, bass, catfish, salmon, stripers, sturgeon, crappie, bluegill, you name it, you can catch them out here on the California Delta. Well, the Delta is a water source for the farmers from basically all of California. And so a lot of the water gets shipped down to Southern California, and they're requiring more and more. But the Delta's in trouble. California fights for water, and the water rights are very important to a lot of different people, a lot of different aspects. And I just feel like we need to learn how to get along and share the water for everybody and not just deplete one part of it. Because that's what they're trying to do to the Delta, is they're trying to drain the Delta from the fresh and make it salt. The one thing about the Delta that disturbs me the most is that more people don't get to enjoy it. And for the future of the youth, they're not gonna have an opportunity if things seem to go the way that they've been going. It's definitely a national treasure. It's a part of history. It's a waterway. It's a recreation for a lot of different people in a lot of different places. Now, when you come to the California Delta, flipping is definitely a must. I mean, 12 months out of the year. But this is where flipping was born. A guy by the name of D. Thomas, back in the early 70s, took a technique called tule dipping and had to shorten his rods. And because Bass came out with a rule of rods no longer than 8 feet, so he had to cut his rods down because tule dipping considered was 12, 14, 16 foot rods. But when they come out with that rule, he had to shave his rods down, and so he invented flipping. Then he actually took that technique from the California Delta and Clear Lake and took it back east to Beaver Lake and won a Bassmaster tournament on it. So that tells you how good flipping is. Flipping is a technique that when you come to the Delta, it's a must-do technique. You can either punch mats or you can just flip wood, you can flip docks, you can flip rocks. It's pretty much anything that you want to do to learn how to flip, this is the place to be. When you're pulling up to an area and you're kind of wondering why these fish are holding underneath these mats, well, most of these areas have grass surrounding the whole bay or the whole pocket. And underneath these hyacinth mats and these pennywort mats, it's completely clear and open underneath. And then so I get asked, why would you use, such heavy Maxima line? Well, the 65-pound Maxima braided line allows you to pull those fish through that hyacinth and get a good hook set. And you have to set the hook really hard. So if you approach this with 10 or 15 or even 20-pound fluorocarbon, most of the times you break those fish off. So the 65-pound braided line is definitely the way to go in these areas, even though they're open underneath. There it is. Right there. That's what I'm talking about. That's a bass right there, folks. Punching big Delta bass, same thing, that real dark color on him. Love that. Look at that thing. Just fat, real healthy bass. Nice and dark and pretty. There he goes. You see all this heavy matted vegetation out there? This is a comfort zone for the bass. I mean, that's why we have to fish this big heavy line and these big rods, is because you're in their habitat. They feel comfortable underneath there. This is their house, and they get up underneath there. They've got food, they've got shelter, and that's not much more the bass can ask for, is food and shelter in a place. It's just like you like being at home and you got a refrigerator full of food, you're a pretty happy camper. So this matted vegetation here, most of it, what you'll see is it's pretty much on the top. Some of this hyacinth has some roots underneath it, but this right here, this kind of algae mat here, it's just thick on top and there's nothing underneath it but just dark water. And so the bass can get up underneath there, they can blend in real well to the top, and any bait fish that swim underneath there, they're gonna eat them right away. Biggin, that's a biggin, that's a real biggin. Oh my goodness, that's a real biggin. That's a giant one. We gotta go get him. Oh my gosh, that's a giant one. Folks, if we get this one, you're gonna see how big this fish is. Oh my gosh, look at this thing.
Fishing the California Delta, not only making dreams come true, but making memories. And the one memory that I have is 11 years ago, making one of my first top 12 cuts. Thing about it, flipping the tules, casting frogs over the giant grass mats out there, and catching giant bass.
Biggin, that's a biggin, that's a real biggin. Oh my goodness, that's a real biggin. That's a giant one. We gotta go get him. Oh my gosh, that's a giant one. Folks, if we get this one, you're gonna see how big this fish is. Oh my gosh, look at this thing. Oh my goodness.
That's what I'm talking about when you're flipping and punching. Oh, my goodness. Folks at home, let me tell you, this is why I do this, especially on the California Delta, catching bass like this. That flipping technique, oh my gosh. Woo! Great part about living out here in the California Delta is amazing big bass fishery like that one. If you notice, and going down these stretches, there's little points and stuff. And there's an algae mat point, and then there's a hyacinth mat point. And this one was on one of those hyacinth mat points. You can see the big hole that's ripped in there. And I punched it through there. As soon as it went through, you got to keep contact with your bait as it's going through, because a lot of time these fish will eat it as soon as it goes through. Not as you're hopping it, but as soon as it goes through, all of a sudden you might get a bite. And so you got to be able to click that reel over, set that hook on that fish, and wind him and crank him out of there. One thing about it, when you get these fish in this thick, heavy cover, you don't play with them out there. You play with them in the boat. Set the hook hard, wind, 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 and swing them in the boat. Don't wait for the net.
With the punch rig, line size is very important. 65-pound Maxima braided line. Once you got that set up, then you have to go to having a stop. This one right here is a Paycheck Baits punch stop. Very important for stopping that 1 ounce or 1.5 ounce river to sea trash bomb weight. Then it's a Paycheck Baits punch skirt. Ish's Cash Money, my favorite color, teamed up with a Missile Baits D-bomb trailer. Well, everybody knows I love dropping bombs on them. When you got the river to sea trash bomb and the Missile Baits D-bomb, that's where we drop bombs on them. And then now rigged up with the New Jack flipping hook. The important about the New Jack flipping hook is it actually creates a cavitation when you set the hook. So you see, I hooked a lot of those fish right in the roof of the mouth or in the head. They never came off. That's because of the way that this hook is set up. You can either tie a snell to it like I do, or you can tie directly to the second eye and still get that same cavitation to where that hook swings upwards and hooks them in the roof of the mouth. So now that you rig it Texas style, like so, you got your punch rig ready to go. Most of the fish that I've been catching have been punching, and it's been a fantastic bite.
As the tide starts to bottom out, that stuff underneath the heavy matted vegetation starts to get really shallow, and I think the fish actually move away from it and back out to the edge. What I'm doing is I'm actually fishing a different, little bit more sparser grass that's sitting on the actual channel break itself. So it's a lot of places where the fish will actually move from up in the shallows out to the edge, and they're a little bit easy, more concentrated. So you can pretty much call your shots or call the areas that you really want to fish. So you just kind of look for these areas with the sparse grass, and it has a pretty steep drop off on the edge of it, and there'll be fish right there. Got him, big one. Oh yeah. He ain't as big as I thought he was, but man, he came up and he crushed that whopper plopper really good. Oh, boy, you swore you were a 4 or 5 pounder. Gosh. But you did get the whopper plopper good. Oh, another nice bass. Woo! Man, another nice fish on the whopper plopper. You know, River to Sea came out with this bait, and it's just one of these fantastic baits, especially, you know, when you get windy conditions, you need something really, really loud. The River to Sea whopper plopper makes a lot of noise. 2 big treble hooks on it usually gets these fish. These fish get it really, really good. I love this bait. Throwing it on 50-pound Maxima braided line. You know, I'm actually using a composite rod, the Daiwa Steve's Flexlight rod. It's almost like when you're fishing crankbaits or any other topwater. I really like composite or a fiberglass rod. Oh, a couple fish in this pocket here. Oh, these hooks got him good. A little bit. Whoa, be careful, there are hooks flying everywhere. Well, there's a few fish hanging out up there. He ate it good. Something got on his fin back there. I wonder if there's another one up in that same little spot there.
Even though the Delta's a vast place, it's pretty easy to fish. You can almost fish any way you want and almost anywhere.
The techniques that I showed you are the ways that I would fish the Delta for catching big bass in the Delta. But you can come out here, fish any way you want, have a great time, and enjoy fishing out here on the Delta.
So you've tried and tried to skip this bait way back under the docks where the big ones live? Well, grab a notebook because Randy Howell is going to show us how it's done in Bass School 101.
Now skipping, just like I just did, is something I get a lot of questions about at seminars, at the Bass Pro Shop tanks. Everybody walks up and they say, we saw you on TV, we saw you catching a fish out from under a dock. Tell us how to skip the bait under the dock. What do you do? First, a 7-foot medium heavy. I use a Daiwa Steez spinning rod, which is a little bit stiffer rod. I prefer that. I do better with that. And I use braided line. Daiwa J braid, 20-pound test braided line. It's very limp. It's 8 strands. It's very tight and it's easy to skip. And it's one key element that really makes it easy, and that's what I want to show you right here. It's all about your index finger, just like with a bait caster. If you're going to be good with a bait caster, your thumb is a key element there. With a spinning rod, skipping a bait, that index finger is what you've got to use. And what I mean by that is feathering your spool right here. So don't even focus on me doing this. You just focus on that, feathering the spool just like that. And that, as that line goes through, my finger brushes against the lip of that spool, and that line comes through there. And the less I touch it, the faster the line goes. The more I touch it, the more I'm able to guide that lure with tight index finger. The line is feathering through that finger, and as I'm getting it where I want it to go, I slow it down with that index finger, and that raises that bait up off the water and makes that bait continue to slide, almost like a rock sliding over the water. It's not how hard you throw down at the water, it's what you do with that finger to raise that bait up off the water to make it slide. Now skipping is not something you're going to go out all of a sudden and be great at on your first try, so it takes a lot of practice. Just like basketball, shooting free throws, you got to practice a lot to be good at it. So take the rod out there, don't take other rods with you, just take your skipping rod, your spinning rod with your braid, go out and practice it all day on a lake with a lot of docks, and eventually you're going to get good at it.
Hello and welcome to the beautiful outdoor world here in San Jose, California. We've got a great show planned for you today, so let's just get right to it. If your lake has both trout and bass stocked in it, you definitely want to hang around today as Rick Clun goes in depth on those type of lakes. Then Chris Lane is going to teach us which hooks to use for the different shapes of soft plastics. That's today's Bass School 101. But first, I want to show you just how deadly a jerkbait can be in situations you probably never thought of. That's today's Fishing in 5.
There we go. That's a start. Right where he should be, right at the mouth of a canal. You know, a jerkbait is one of my favorite baits when I got to cover a lot of water and I'm looking for active fish, because even when they're inactive, they can't handle that stop and go retrieve. You know, I've got a whole system, series of canals, I got a lot of grass, and the number one thing is I got clear water. Right here, first thing in the morning, right on the mouth of this little canal right here, there's grass all through the whole thing. That jerkbait is just something that I can just cover water pretty quick with, and I have a lot of confidence in it. Oh, there he is. Oh, big one. Oh, wow. Oh, look at that fish there. You know, sometimes if it's real grassy, I'll use a soft plastic jerkbait, but when it's like this, when it's pretty clean, looky there, he's got a face full. And that's the thing about this, is you can just make them mad. I gotta get my pliers here. This time of the year, when I'm seeing a lot of bait and keying on it, I use different techniques than I would other times, and that's why a jerkbait is a good choice. Anytime I've got clear water, it's in the back of my mind. So this is what I'm throwing this morning right here. It's just a standard Strike King KVD jerkbait. That crystal shad color is very natural looking shad pattern right now. Right off the get-go this morning, I seen a lot of shad flipping. These fish are gonna be set up on the edges of that grass. looking for that bait. So a jerkbait's a good way to be able to cover a lot of water. There's long canals here that we can fish, and I can go right down the center of them. You know, I've got that lure right where the fish should be the whole cast. But so far, so good. Now, I know when I have clearer water, the fish are gonna be a little more selective in what they want. And that jerkbait is so visible. You can cover a ton of water with it, so that's why it's kind of one of my go-to baits. You know, a jerkbait is one of my favorite lures if I've got schooling fish too, just because it's so efficient. You know, the fish don't have to be up on top and to catch them. So, I mean, I just saw shad running out there in the middle, kind of way out off the bank. I'm right here by a little ditch mouth, and you know, when you're just blind casting around an area where the bass are schooling at, a jerkbait is a really good tool. And that's all that happened there. I didn't see any schooling, but I just seen some shad move that looked like they were being chased by something. Look at there. I mean, he absolutely got it. Good solid fish right there. You know, the biggest thing that I try to do in a situation like this is set the boat up, if I can, so that I'm running the bait parallel down some kind of edge where I think the fish is at. You want to keep that lure over the strike zone for as long as possible. So going down these canals, I can throw right down the center, I can throw right down the edge if it's a steeper grass line. Anytime I can get that bait going right down along an edge, you're just a lot more efficient. If you know an area that should be high percentage where the fish are sitting, make sure your lure's in the strike zone the whole cast. There he is. I mean, these fish are definitely relating to bait, so we're gonna, use something that tries to get them to bite. There's not a breath of wind. They're not schooling. There's not any activity. As I say that, look here, they came up. I've seen shad, but I have not seen that yet, and they're still there. Yeah, you can see the shad's pushed up right up on, oh, look at that. I'm just trying to make that bait jump as much as possible. You know, with a jerkbait, it's critical to fish it with some slack in the line to get that erratic action. I'm fishing it pretty quick though. I'm not making a lot of pauses, long pauses. I gotta make it really look like it's an easy meal. Got him. Woo! You know, most people would never dream of throwing a jerkbait under these circumstances. I mean, you'd look at this and say, hey, I should be throwing a frog or doing something up there, but because they're out off the bank, this is the perfect scenario to fish something like this where you can actually get out there and trigger these fish into biting. That jerkbait has that side-to-side action and they just can't help it. You know, I mean, the shad are starting to move around and get more in the open water. That's what they're keying on. There's grass all through the whole thing. And the number one thing is I got clear water. You know, anytime I see that, I know that this bait is gonna be money.
If your lake is both stocked with bass and trout, you're gonna wanna fish it quite a bit differently than you would a lake in the south that has a shad forage base. Today, Rick Klun's gonna break it down and go in depth.
Today we're going to be fishing for trophy bass, and we're going to be doing it in what's really an overlooked fisheries, what I call overlooked fisheries, even though they're public. And it's really these trout-managed lakes that are throughout the south and eastern part of the United States. We're all aware of the ones out in California that they've been successfully raised 20-pound bass feeding off rainbow trout. So that's what we're going to be doing today, and I'm going to show you some of the techniques I think might work, and I'm going to show you the mentality you'll have to achieve them. Historically, way back, 40, 50 years ago, most people thought of 10-pound plus fish. They thought about Florida and fishing big, river shiners and golden shiners. But then the Texas Parks and Wildlife did an amazing thing. They actually decided to take Floridas and put them in Texas lakes. But since Floridas, they were afraid didn't have much cold tolerance, there was a lake in Texas that genetically produced the largest fish in Texas. It's a lake called Lake Merville.
And they took a Merval bass and Florida bass and crossbreeded them and created what they called the F1s. And that's really what started this big, huge bass craze, and that's the fish that created Lake Fork. And then California followed Texas and started taking them out there into their lakes. And the thing they discovered was you add rainbow trout to that equation, and these fish go from 10 and 12 and 14 and 15 pounders to over 20 in some cases. And what I'm going to talk about today is some really great opportunities to catch big fish that most people don't even know about. And it's public water. We're on a lake here in the central part of the country. It's mostly known for trout, but a lot of the locals here, they keep it a secret. It's some of the biggest bass in this part of the country come out of this lake. And it's the same thing that's happening in the California lakes. They feed off trout a lot, and thus are just going to get a lot bigger. On these lakes where we have a mixture of trout and bass both, one of the first things that I try to understand is I try to find the part of the lake I think they kind of co-mingle. In other words, the temperature range that they're both kind of comfortable in. You know, the trout itself tend to prefer, you know, that 50 to 60 degree range. And largemouth really have a wide range that they can tolerate, but they prefer kind of between 60 and 70. Right now, our water temperature here is about 60 to 61. So right here, I think you could potentially have trout and bass both, and that's what I'm looking for. When you're fishing docks or anything or targets like this, one of the things that I've learned from these trophy hunters with these big swim baits, if they fish a particular dock and they have a big one or two come out and follow it, that's real key to them. They want to learn where those big fish are living, where the home base is for them, a dock, a big tree fall, whatever. And then all they do is come back to it different times of the day until they find that one little window of time where that big fish might be aggressive, and that's when they'll catch them. He wanted it right at the boat. A good friend who I consider the best swim bait fisherman of all says 50% of your swim bait fish will eat it when it starts coming up at the boat. Now, can you imagine a 7-8 pounder doing that? You know, the bass in these systems are not F1s. They're not genetically altered. They're more the native cold water species. And so they're not going to grow as fast. Now, they will, because of these high protein trout, potentially get considerably bigger than their relatives in the lakes around here that don't have the trout. And that's really what we're keying on. Where an 7 or 8 pounder may be common and sometimes in the other lakes, here you would have a lot of 8 and 10 pounders that you wouldn't have in those other lakes. It's all about their food. It's all about the quality of the water they're in. If they don't have the food, you can have 10-year-old fish that won't be over 2 pounds. Dude, you're about 7-8 years away from should they eat that bait.
I've always loved fishing for bass in lakes that they stock trout in. One thing that I've noticed is that they definitely target these trout when the truck backs up and dumps them in the lake. So you really want to match the color and the size of that forage. I've caught some really big bass doing this, but I've also had some great days. The number of fish that target these trout is incredible. So if you're fishing that lake, make sure you got a trout imitated lure on.
Fishing for these bigger bass, it really is a whole new set of lures have come out in the last 10 to 15 years, and they're called these trout versions, these swim bait versions, these big top waters. I mean, these baits are so much bigger than what most bass fishermen in most of their life ever even thought about throwing. And yet, this is what they use to catch those bigger fish, and that's really what we're going to be trying to do today. They come out in all sizes and shapes, and believe me, they're still evolving. A lot of the early ones were these big wooden ones, and these would actually swim underneath, or they would wake on top. Then you have, you know, true topwaters. This is another wake bait that we've actually caught some fish on already. And it basically, you can swim it on top, you can let it go down and swim it maybe subsurface an inch or two. Then you have the subsurface baits. This is truly one of the very first trout version baits that we saw come into these trout fisheries where they had giant bass like they do in California. And it's just basically, it's a trout. And then you have what they call glide baits. These baits basically are subsurface and they just go back and forth. I mean, they don't really walk, they don't really do anything but glide. And they just glide. And there's a time that those baits work better. All these baits though really are, imitating two things. One is a big bait fish, whether it's a trout, whether it's a big threadfin shad or a gizzard shad, whether it's a big brim. And the other thing it's imitating is something usually that's somewhat hurt. There's two different theories on the actions of the bait. One of them is they don't want a lot of action, except for that tail. And if you really look at a lot of big gizzard shad and stuff, and you don't see the body moving that much. Okay, you'll see the tail moving. So that's one theory on the lures that I see a lot. But there is another prevalent theory, and that's where you got a lot of action. That's not, a lot of these guys that say you don't want a lot of action say that's too much action. I don't totally agree with that. It's too much action if you want it to look alive and real. It's not too much action, I believe, if it's injured. Because when it's injured, it's doing all of weird things, because maybe it's broke, its back's been broken, so it's not going to look normal. But that, again, is a sign of weakness to that predator. So I think both of them are valid, and we just have to learn when to use them. So the weaker we can make these big baits look, the more we're apt to trigger that bass to strike, even if he's not aggressively feeding. Now this is the example of, even though you're fishing bigger baits, little fish are very ambitious sometimes, and they will actually try to hit the bait. A trophy fish nowadays in the southern part of the United States, and definitely in California, is something that's probably over 10 pounds. And if you want to target the trophy fish, it's really a whole different approach than the way most of us fish, the way I fish. I programmed myself early in my career to catch 2-pounders because we had a 15 fish limit back then, and it finally shrunk to 10 fish. And then I guided, and your customers wanted 30, 40, 50 bites a day. And to do that, to achieve that, you've got to be really focused on smaller fish, schools of 2-pounders. And I got very, very good at that and really made my whole career doing that. These are still, just good fish, but they're not big fish. But maybe I need to be going to a bigger bait to discourage these. And that's where the catch 22 is in all this. I like catching all sizes. And the problem is sometimes you don't change quick enough that you end up catching again all little ones, and you forget your original objective, which was trying to catch big ones. You got to get rid of that 40, 50 bite day mindset. You've got to adapt a 4 or 5 bite mentality. On a good day, that's what you'll get. And these lures aren't what most people throw, and they're going to discourage smaller fish. One of the best guys at this I know, he fishes sometimes a day or two without a bite, and then boom, he'll catch a 10 or 11 pounder on the third day. So we all know there's not too many anglers that have the patience or discipline to do that, but that's what it takes. Yeah, I know how to target these. How do I target your big brother, and your mom, and your dad? That's what I'm trying to learn. One of the things that I've learned, when I first started my career, I thought, and this is 40 years ago, I said, one of these days I'll figure it all out. And I got close, I thought, at one time in my career, and then now I realize you'll never figure it all out. Things are constantly changing. We don't live in a static universe. And literally, I'm at the point now in my career where I know I have to reinvent myself in a lot of ways if I'm going to continue to compete at a high level. And that's why I kind of enjoy this ideal and studying this technique, because it's a big bass technique. It's not going out there and catching numbers, but that's the one thing that I really need to learn. And even though I may not succeed the first few times I'll try a technique like this, because most of the time you don't, You got to get confidence in it. You got to learn all the little idiosyncrasies of it. Still, I know this is the way to catch bigger fish.
Here's a fast fact for you. If you like fishing braided line like I do, but you struggle with something to cut it successfully with, this is what you need. These are my Randy Howell's Signature Series ceramic super cutters. They're different than all other scissors because they're ceramic, so they don't dull like everything else metal. So you can take it successfully, clip that braid anytime, fast as you want to, keep them in your boat, keep them in your truck, always cuts sharp every time. Check out ceramic super cutters.
With the infinite choices you have for hooks and lures, it can be a bit confusing to put together a rig that actually catches fish. Today, Chris Lane's going to break it down for you in our Bass School 101.
You know, we get questions all the time on what hooks to throw in soft plastic baits. Well, there's so many soft plastic baits, from flipping baits to stick baits to soft swim baits. Today we're going to show you a little bit about what I use on the water. First is a flipping bait. This is a drop dead crawl. We have a trocar with a hook keeper on it. It's a flipping hook. It's a straight shank. And what you do is you take this and you put it under there. And the reason this bait keeper is so important is because it keeps the bait on there, especially when you're flipping heavy cover. So the bait goes in easier. It's a straight shank, which makes the bait go in easier into the match, because with an off shank, it's going to be sticking out, it's going to hang up more. Now another one that we all throw and all love to throw, especially in the spring, is a shallow water swim bait. It's got a screw lock on it, and then as it comes down, it's very wide. The screw lock is so important because you're making very long casts with it and you're reeling it. Long cast, reeling it. So there's a lot of pressure, a lot of momentum going into your cast, which will rip the bait off of the hook if you don't have the screw lock on there. Now, a stick style bait, this is a pal stick, off shank. It's a straight shank hook, but it's got the off shank. There again, you're making long casts and you don't have much hook showing because it's going to be dragging through the mud and the silt, and it's just going to be floating down. Boom, the hook comes out, helps you catch more fish. And of course, the soft plastic jerk bait. We all love it. It's always got the bigger belly. This bait here, this hook, this is a perfect setup to help you catch more fish. But if you hook it through, you can see it's got that extra EWG gap on it. And what you'll do is you'll take this hook, stick it in there, skin hook that. And the reason being, you can see there's not much hook showing, but you've got plenty of penetration when you set the hook. So over the years, switching up hooks, changing to these four style hooks right here, have made a big difference in helping me put fish in the boat. Hopefully it helps you.
You'll never guess where I'm at. Memphis, Tennessee. This is Bass Pro Shops at the Pyramid. Today we have a great show with Edwin Evers and Randy Howell, and you'll want to stick around for Bass School 101 with Kevin Van Dam. But first, let me show you this incredible store. It's huge. It has over 800,000 square feet of retail space, and that's what makes it one of the largest stores in the world. Fishing, hunting, camping, hiking, anything for the outdoors, you can find it right here in Memphis, Tennessee. Hey, let's get to fishing. Today, Randy Howell's going to show us what he does with the Senko when he's fishing around boat docks. It's today's Fishing in 5.
I'm going to show you 3 things that I do that make me successful when I'm fishing a Senko. Dog, way up under that dog. Skip that Senko in there, and that little dude took off with it. I was watching my line, and he just took off flying back in there. He just couldn't resist it. I mean, a 5-inch Senko is probably the best bait in the world to catch a bass on when it's hard to get a bite. In conditions like this, hard to get a bite. He's not a big guy, but in a tournament, that would be a good little keeper right there to start your day out with. Yeah. The first thing, it's all about the lure. The Gary Yamamoto Senko. It is one of the fish catchingest pieces of plastic ever invented, and I love to throw it around docks. Now you know the bass are going to be laying way back under there where everybody else is not getting their bait too, because there's going to be a big hole in that grass where no sunlight's penetrating. So you've got to get that bait subtle and quiet back into that area. That's why skipping very low, very subtle with no weight with this Senko is a big difference. It's all about letting it go nice and easy, and it makes that light little skip. It almost sounds like a little minnow fluttering across the surface. And the fish follow that sound. If you skip a big jig in there, something that splashes big or makes a lot of noise, that fish is going to run off, not bite. But that Senko is subtle, and then as it falls in that hole, the end of that Senko wiggles, wiggles, wiggles. It's almost like he's clapping, saying, "Come bite me." And that's what I think when I cast it under there. The second big factor that I believe is really important in this technique is braided line. That feels like a good one there. Well, that's a good one. Yeah, buddy, I knew it. Any second now we were gonna get us one of these studs up under that dock. Wow, that's a big fish here now. This is what you're looking for. Look at that. Oh man. Look at that big old fish there. Yes. Oh, look at that big boy. He was up under that dock right out at the end. 3 little fish in a row, and then bam-a-lam, there comes a nice 4 1/4, 4 1/2 pounder. And that's what you do on these slick, calm days when you can't get a bite. Get that Senko out. Skip it under those docks and those big holes in the grass, and in any second you're gonna get one of those big ones like that. And see that braided line, like I mentioned before, that braid is real key there. And if I'd have been skipping 10 or 12 pound fluorocarbon line around the back side of that steel piling right there, snap, it would have broke my line and broke my heart all in one time. But that braid, the fish went around the back, and I just steadily held him there, pulled him right around the pole, no problem at all, and got him in the boat. Big gun. Come on, baby, that's a big one. Cool. Now the third thing in the whole mix here is getting the right type of docks in view, and that's all about a pattern. And docks can be patterned just like grass can be patterned or riprap can be patterned. You've got to figure out which type of docks to fish. See, all these docks I'm fishing now have solid grass all around them, and it's just too choked off. But looking ahead here, I see this slip section here that's sitting out further than all the other docks. The last fish I caught was on another section that was further out. Therefore, you got deeper water, maybe even 6 inches to 12 inches more depth, but you got less choked off grass, so the fish can roam around freely under there and use those holes in the grass under the dock. So this should be a spot to catch one. Come on, good one. Right underneath the back of that boat again. That's a nice one. Now that time I let it just fall, twitched it a little bit, let it fall again, and boom, that fish got it. Another good fat keeper. These are some short, wide fish up here, very healthy in that grass. And that time after it went in there, I twitched and let it fall again, and I watched my line. And if I hadn't been watching my line, that fish could have swallowed the bait or could have let the bait go, but I watched my line, and I'm always keeping my eye on it as it's laying flat on the water. And you notice as it sinks with no fish on it, it gradually moves very slow, and that's when the Senko is falling like this. And when you see it do a little jump or 2 little jumps and then it speeds up, go ahead and tighten down and set the hook, because he's on there. You don't even have to check. You know, and this is the dock. This is the dock that I just pointed at and referenced and said this looks like the dock we should get bit on, because it's further out, a little bit deeper, has bigger holes of grass because it's out a little bit further offshore, and that's where the fish are going to draw to like a magnet. So next time you go to your favorite lake and there's a lot of docks there, you use these 3 keys that we've talked about today, and I guarantee you, you're going to break the code to dock fishing on your favorite lake.
We asked Edwin Evers if he had a choice what 3 lures he'd use right before the spawn. Edwin's answer is today's In Depth.
You know, one of the things that I've learned in my fishing career is that it can get tough, you know, the 2-3 days leading up to the spawn. You know, we're about 3 days in front of a full moon, the water temperature's right, Those fish they're just coming up from the deeper water, they're getting shallow, they're really spooky when they're in clear water. One thing that I've learned is to combat that is to try to find some muddy water, some stained water in the body of water that you're fishing. Those fish feel a lot more comfortable up there really shallow in that muddy water. And it's really simple, you know, they can't see you, I can't see them, and 3-4 lures, you've got your whole thing covered right there in that muddy water, and you can catch them when it gets tough like that right before they go to spawn. Got him. So he was following it out. The good thing about muddy water is that they just are not near as spooky as they are in clear water when they're up there spawning. They still have to protect the area. I saw that fish waking to come get it. That fish isn't very long, but man, he's thick. I think fish that spawn in muddy water are a lot easier to catch because one, they can't see you and you can't see them. They have to get shallow to have light penetration to develop those eggs. So they're really shallow. There's not a lot of places they can hide. They're gonna be on the bank. I like to actually throw my bait on the bank and just slip it into the water. Very quiet entry, very, very shallow. I can't stress to you how shallow these fish will actually get. I also tend to think that there's less silt right along the banks in these muddy water systems. Those fish spawn so close to the bank, everything else out in the middle away from the bank silted in. It's still a hard bank right up on the bank, and it's easier for them to make a bed. They need to have hard bottom to make those spawning beds. Got him, right on the bank. That's one thing about them fish, when they're spawning, they are on the bank. Now they're gonna be shallow. It just makes their strike zone a lot smaller when you're fishing muddy water. You can see his tail's kind of bloody and red right there. Just a little male. These fish, one, are gonna be shallow. Two, they're gonna be next to a big object. You know, today, so far, everything's been next to a big lay down, something big in the water. There's been lots of little bushy stuff, but you have something big in the water, they're gonna tuck up next to that stuff, and they just feel protected. They feel like they can probably keep one side of their bed protected from bluegill and invaders. They want to be next to something big. Oh, right there. I got him. I got him. I'll be darned. I saw that fish move. I thought I spooked him. He's actually moving to come over there and get my bait. How cool was that? Man, that fish was so shallow. I mean, just if I can describe it, guys, that fish was that deep. And I pitched in there and I saw a boil and a turn and a mud flash. And I thought, oh, I spooked him. He actually turned and ate my bait. How cool is that? If you're really paying attention to the bank, you're gonna notice, you know, you'll notice a little ripple coming out, or you'll notice a fish darting out, or maybe a minnow jumping out of the water. You'll just see something going down that bank. Maybe it'll be a twig moving. Maybe you're in an area that's got a bunch of cattails, and you'll just see a little cattail just shake just a little bit. Those are the areas where I wanna key my bites or key my pitches. You know, any one of those could be where a bass is sitting. Man, it's just amazing. When you find the right stretch, I guarantee you that stretch right there's got a harder bottom. Nice chunky fish. There's lots of baits that can catch bass in shallow, muddy water, but you know, three of my favorites are, you know, just for me to keep it simple, you know, a spinnerbait, you know, square bill crankbait, and a jig. I really like a spinnerbait because, you know, in muddy water, it gives off a very good vibration. It's a profile of a lot of things bass eat. A lot of times those fish are up in the water column. You can keep a spinnerbait up in the water column better than you can other baits. And, you know, it comes through the cover so well. The thing I love about throwing a square bill this time of the year, you know, it's just such a reaction bite. You know, these fish are up there guarding, and when I reel this S-crank down really quick by that fish or by that log, you know, it's just a trigger bite. Something they want to protect that area that they're in, and this thing comes in there and it's invading the area where they're at. It's just a trigger mechanism that they're going to hit that bait. A jig's just such a key to have on your deck this time of year because you can put it places that you can't put the other baits. You know, it's just something you can put in those places. It represents a bluegill very well, or a big crawdad, something in there coming to raid their beds. It just is a great fish catcher year round. I find that, you know, one of those three is going to work for every situation that I might come to going down the bank. You know, some of those laydowns are perfect for a square bill. Some of them are perfect for that spinnerbait. There's lots of places I can't get those two baits. You know, a really tight bushy thing, I need to throw that jig in there.
The pre-spawn is one of the best times to catch the biggest fish of your life. I actually caught the biggest fish of my life practicing for a tournament in the pre-spawn. I was going and I was checking this one bank and I actually shook off a few fish, decided, hey, I'm gonna go check this other side over here. I checked the other side of the bank, I start flipping down the bank, I get a bite, I said, hey, let me see how big he is. Set the hook, flipping, oh my God, it's a giant. Runs underneath the boat, jumps on the other side, comes back underneath the boat, I grab it, 14 pounds, 1 ounce. You catch the biggest bass of your life in the pre-spawn.
Here we are, the 3 days right before a full moon, thus the spawn. You know, we have some water really close to 6 degrees, that magical number right when they spawn. Got him. See him come back and got it that time. Oh, yeah. Man, that's a fun bite when they're in 6 inches of water. Not a giant, but a nice fat fish. Tell that fish is living shallow. You know, blue heron or something poked it at one point. The spawn doesn't happen all at once. In most of the country, it happens over a month, sometimes 2 month period. So the great thing about muddy water is if you've had a warming trend for 1-2 weeks, it's gonna warm up so much faster than that clear water. A lot of times they'll spawn earlier in the upper sections in the stained water. The lower end will be colder and it'll happen, you know, a month later down there. So you can follow that spawn all the way from the top of the lake to the bottom of the lake. There's one. Right on the bank again. I literally threw that crankbait right on the bank. There's a prime example of what fish go through right here. Look how beat up this fish is. I mean, he has just got marks all over him. I know he's little fish, but man, they're up there so shallow. That spawn process, it's hard on them. They get beat up. One thing I always try to think about consciously when I'm fishing, when fish I think are spawning in dirty water, clear water, doesn't matter, try to make as long a presentations as you possibly can. You just have a lot less chance of spooking those fish. The further you can be from them, the further you can to present that lure up there to them. And also try to be quiet at everything. I turn my depth finders off. You know, they're making noise. I try to keep my trolling motor to really slow speed. So many times I've seen people just, they're really, really loud. And the quieter you can be, you know, just you're gonna get that many more bites. There's a good one. Oh yeah, look at that one. It's fun. Catching spawning fish in muddy water. Man, come here, baby. Oh yeah. Look at that, all beat up from spawning. Nice one. You know, this time of year when these fish are fixing to spawn, don't be afraid to turn right back around, go right back down a stretch where you had some bites. You know, pick up a different bait, going just a different direction, you're gonna put that bait in a lot of different areas. And all the time you have new fish moving in this time of year. There he is. Got him that time. That ain't the same fish. He's not little. Nice chunky bass though. That's one thing about it, when you lose one, you know, I let that fish rest. I pulled about a 3.5 pounder out of that location earlier and he came off. And there's its mate right there. Nice fish. You know, when these fish get up there and they get tight on the beds, you know, and they get spooky, no matter how muddy it is, you know, if you'll just downsize your baits just a little bit, you know, like a smaller spinner bait, a smaller jig, you know, kind of trim the skirt up on it, to where it's not such a big presence coming through that muddy water, you'll catch more fish. You know, you'll still catch big ones on that downsized stuff as you would, but you'd think, you know, it's kind of opposite. You'd think big baits, you know, big bulk in that mud, but when they're on beds like this in that real shallow water, I found that a little more subtle presentation can have a big effect. Got her. It's a great thing about it when they're spawning. If they miss it the first time in muddy water, just throw back out there and they will get it again. That is a good one. Man, that's a fat old fish. She ate it that second time. You know, you need to experiment with speed when you're dealing with spawning bass, especially in muddy water like this. You know, there's gonna be days that that they want a slow fall on your jig, and there's going to be days and they want like a big heavy 1/2 ounce jig, even in that shallow water, something that'll fall really fast to trigger those bites. You know, today I caught the most of them on a 3/8 ounce jig. Same thing with the crankbait. Some days, you know, they just want it down through there, you know, meandering around those logs. Some days they want it really, really burning. Same with the spinnerbait. Some days you want to wake it right underneath the surface, and there's other days you want to get it down out of sight. So experiment with the speed to trigger those bites during the spawn.
Get 3 on their fish, that's amazing. Golly, look at the size of that one. Oh my goodness, I can't get her out. Oh, golly, I can't even see my jig. Holy smokes, look at the colors. Oh, come here, baby. Oh, that's what springtime is all about. Golly. Man, I pitched that thing up on the bank. Look how pretty that fish is. And she went up there and got it. What an awesome fish. I love these tattoos. I just think that's like just a really cool bass. And they got all those tattoos on them. Man, that's a chunk. Woohoo! That's fun. Let's put it back so she can finish spawning, doing what she's doing. Oh, look at her. That's a cool fish right there. Look at all that.
Up next, 7-time Angler of the Year is here. KVD takes us to school. Here comes Bass School 101.
Hey, I love to fish crankbaits, and one of the questions I get asked is, when should I throw a rattling one versus a silent bait? Well, I can tell you that I've had a lot of success with both. And in general, what I do is I look at the conditions and the water clarity in deciding if I want one that's real loud with a lot of rattles or something that's quiet. So, you know, if the water's dirty, if the water's real warm, the fish's activity level's a lot higher, and especially if I know I'm fishing for unpressured fish, I always start with a rattling crankbait. You know, you take a deep diver that's got a rattle in it, it helps the fish home in on it, and even a silent bait is not completely silent. I mean, it makes some noise with the hooks banging against it. You know, I'm not sure exactly what the bass think about a rattling crankbait, but it definitely catches their attention. You know, I've seen before just diving underneath the water. If you bang 2 rocks together, if you bang on a dock post, it draws a bass's attention. They're curious. So that sound, a lot of times, whether it's natural to them or if it's something that piques their curiosity, I know is very important. You know, times when I like silent baits are when you have high bright skies, not a lot of wind, a lot of fishing pressure in the area. A bait that comes in more stealthy and just has the wiggle and the vibration and a little bit of sound coming off the hooks rattling against it is going to be a lot better in those situations. So, and a lot of times it's just about having a unique sound. You know, take for instance this new red-eye shad. This has got a tungsten knocker in it. It has a really loud, unique sound to it. And I've found that, you know, maybe I'm catching fish on a standard, you know, rattling red-eye shad that has all the BBs and that real loud noise to it. If I switch over to this, they start biting again. Or if I switch to a silent bait, they start biting again. I never know exactly what the best sound is. I use those general parameters, but I do know this for sure, that having crankbaits that have different sounds, different rattling versions, different types of rattles, and then a silent one is really important to catching bass. You think he didn't want it?
Hello everyone and welcome to the Bass Pros. We're inside the beautiful Bass Pro Shops Outdoor World in Round Rock, Texas. Today Edwin Evers shows us how he fishes a natural lake in the fall, and he finds some great smallmouth action. How's he catch them? You can't miss today's in-depth. Then Kevin Van Dam gives us a surefire way to catch finicky lockjaw bass in Bass School 101. But first, Chris Lane shows us just how irresistible slow-moving stick baits are, not only to bass, but all kinds of fish. Here comes Fishing in 5.
Today is it's going to be one of those days where you've got bluebird skies. In the fish, you know, we just had a front come through, so the fish are going to be a little bit slower and they're not going to be real active. So This time of year, this grass is gonna start to diminish. It's gonna start, the grass mats are gonna get smaller and smaller. One thing that they will do is they'll start to follow out to that deeper grass, which hasn't been affected by the cold water or the cold air. These grass mats will start to die off. That deeper grass is down there. Those fish are working their way to there. There's a bass. Right on the edge of that grass. Not a giant one, but it's a good start. You know, a lot of the times when you're throwing soft stick baits, it's in the early spring and you're throwing it weightless. Well, today we're gonna learn a little bit about how to throw it on submerged grass. It's getting into the fall this time of year. The grass is starting to dissipate. It's starting to get real small down there and you don't have the big mats anymore. You know, when you're fishing these stick baits, this being a pow stick, throwing it off the edge of this grass, you got a little current, but you got the grass, and the grass is not gonna be here much longer. It's starting, the water's getting colder, it's gonna die off. So when you're throwing it out there, you know, they'll either hit it in the grass or as soon as it comes out off of that edge. And this time of year, one thing you wanna watch out for is fish getting pushed up to the edge of the grass. And when the fish are getting pushed up to the edge, you know, the bait fish, all of a sudden we start to see them start to ambush. And those are the fish that we've been trying to get to bite. It's a good fish right there coming off the edge of that grass. It's a bass. Yes, sir. Woo! And that's about a 2.5, 3 pound fish right there. Just big, healthy, beautiful, golden big largemouth. This is just a stick bait. This is what this is. And the reason this bait is so good, it's good in the spring, it's good in the winter, it's called a do nothing, it just goes down. Well, a lot of the times, most of this time, this bait is thrown weightless. And today we're gonna actually change this a little bit. We're gonna put a bullet weight on it, let it go down through the grass slowly, not a real heavy weight, but it's gonna get down in that 8, 9 foot of water and then we're gonna pull it back slow, because when you're fishing grass like this, one thing you wanna do, make sure you cover water. Those fish will have a tendency to move with the bait fish, especially in the fall patterns. The bait fish are moving, the bass are gonna follow them. So one thing is you wanna, you know, a little bit heavier bait like this, throw it way out there in the grass and work it back slow. You know, you wanna make sure you fish it slow. But the one thing is you're covering water. When you find them in the grass, you find them. Stay on me, girl. What do we have here? Yes, sir. Oh, come here. All right. Woo! You know, that's bass fishing in the grass with a stick bait. You just never know what you're gonna catch. You can go from catching little ones to good 2.5, 3 pound fish like this to even 7 and 8 pounders. This time of year in the fall, when the trees are starting to change colors and it's absolutely gorgeous outside, it's not too cold, but the grass is starting to diminish. The fish are gonna start concentrating to that deeper grass, which hasn't quite died off yet. That's where those big fish are gonna start concentrate. Even just most of all the fish are gonna start heading out there. They wanna hit that winter pattern and get out through their winter holes where they wanna stay. And you know, one of the best spots that we had today was a grass line that came around this point, dropped off into some real deep water, and then those fish will just hit that grass line, feed like they were this evening, and then they'll just push out here as the water temperature gets colder. So make sure you got the right setup. Go out there, have some fun, and catch you some bass in the grass. We've got a big, big fish, and if it's a bass, we're gonna be in a world of trouble. There it is, catfish. Don't break my line. Whoa! Oh. Oh. Not only can you catch bass, but big flatheads like this.
Natural lakes pose a certain challenge that is unique. They can be vast bodies of water, and you would think the fish would be deep. But Edwin Evers shows us, actually it pays to be shallow-minded. Here's today's In Depth.
It's one of my most favorite times of the year, but it's also one of the most challenging times of the year, you know, that fall transition period. We're gonna go try to find some fish that are up shallow, feeding, getting ready to really start put that fall feed on before they go into their winter haunts. And we're gonna try to catch big ones. You know, it's a lot of people go smallmouth fishing and they try to fish deep, and there's still a lot of fish deep, but I've also found this time of year you can catch some giant ones up shallow. Bunch of them. Oh, he's gonna go up right there. Can't even see my spark shad. All right. So many times, you know, smallmouth are deep and you catch them drop shot and you catch them, you know, vertical, looking at them on your electronics, on your Lowrance. But there's times that you just can't find them, you know, that they're too scattered. You can't get the bites out there. And I firmly believe there's smallmouth year-round shallow in a lot of these lakes. And there may not be a lot of them, but generally the ones you can catch up shallow are gonna be big. You know, they're gonna be the right kind. When I'm on natural lakes like this, I look for just drops or changes. You know, right here I'm fishing a drop that goes from 2-3 foot to 4 to 5 feet. And the other thing I look for is transitions from rock to sand, sand to rock, you know, grass to rock, to something where there's a line that those fish can travel up and down that line, that transition zone. Got him. This is a prime example right here where I hooked this fish as a transition zone. It's real shallow and it goes to deep, and all you're looking for is these transition zones. It can be, you know, this is all rock and it's all sand out here, or it could be, you know, a grass transition zone. So those are the kinds of things you look for, you know, to find these fish. Oh, I gotcha. When I think of a transition zone, what I am seeing is just a change, and it can be a change of any type. It can be a change in rock type, it can be a change in bottom depth, it can be a change in composition of the bottom. Those are all areas where I've caught those smallmouth this time of the year. Got one. Oh man, that is so much fun. They fight so hard. Look at the other one with it. There's another one with it. When you catch one, you're gonna catch multiple fish. Ah, gotcha. Something that I always think about when I'm fishing, you know, natural bodies of water is current, and it's wind generated current for the most part. And what I'm thinking about is how is it hitting the shoal or the particular piece of cover that I'm fishing. You know, if you have a shoal or whatever you're fishing right here, you know, the wind's blowing over this way, so you've got current going over it. You know, those fish, a lot of times, if they're really feeding heavily, they're gonna sit on the up current side of it. If they're kind of not feeding heavily, kind of more in a relaxed state of mind, they're gonna be on the down current side of it. So always pay attention to that, and then try to duplicate it once you get a couple bites. Depth finder is really important when I'm fishing deep. But my depth finder is important for this depth for the contour lines. I've got a little drop here. I've got a shallow ridge, and I'm sitting in 4 or 5 foot water out there. I'm throwing up in 2 and 3 foot water, and that's a big drop in natural lakes like this. So transition lines a lot of times are going to be a depth change also. You know, so many of those times, you know, that rock's going to be shallower than the sand. So pay attention to those contour lines on your depth finder. A lot of times those can reveal some of those transition lines for you. There's one. That's a big one too. One thing I like to do, once I get a bite, I put the power poles down immediately just to help hold position. Look at that giant right there. Oh, that's what you come to the Great Lakes for. That is a giant smallmouth. Gotcha. Whoa. Look at that one right there. That is a pig. Golly. Oh, it's a giant. Just beautiful, beautiful fish. That thing is 5 pounds all day long. The width on its tail. Awesome fish. Smallmouth are very much sight-oriented feeders. And what I mean by that, they want to be able to see long distances, see their bait, their prey that they're going to feed on. And that's a reason those transition zones are so key. They can sit in the darker portion of that transition and look out across to the other one. For shallow water smallmouth fishing like this, you know, there's a handful of baits that I like to use. For my moving baits, You know, right here's what I've got. I've got, you know, just a swim bait. This is a Megabass 4-inch spark shad in the IU color. I'm gonna have a spinner bait like this War Eagle 3/4 ounce chartreuse and white bladed. I'm gonna have me a vibration bait, you know, kind of a silent one, like this, you know, Vibration X right here, and then a jerk bait. Those are the baits. I can cover a lot of water. They're gonna be in the right depth for those shallower zones, and I can get that reaction bite covering a lot of water, and I can throw all those a long, long ways. Another big key.
Fishing a tournament a couple years ago in the fall, up north fishing for smallmouth, I come to learn just how small of an area those smallmouth will get in and just how well they'll school up. Once you get a group of those fish going, man, it can be a feeding frenzy like you've never seen before. But it's all about finding those little small areas where those smallmouth are congregated and those feeding type places that they're using. Once you find those areas, man, you can really catch a boatload of them in a short amount of time.
We're fishing the fall transition period, and when I say transition, it is a transition from fish moving shallow or deep to shallow, but it's also a transition where those fish are relating to transition lines. Casting distance is so important fishing clear water like this. You've got to get your baits, whatever it may be, away from the boat. You know, it's shallow, it's very, very clear. You know, these fish can hear a boat slapping in these big waves from a long, long distance. So, you know, get you a spinning reel that you can throw a long ways, or a bait casting reel, but make super long casts. I mean, get the wind behind you to make those long casts so you don't spook those fish and have an opportunity to catch them. Oh, there's another one. Golly, that's a good one. That is one thing about it too. When you end up catching one, you usually find a bunch of them. That's a nice one. Man, look at that fish. Can't even see my spark shad. I mean, it is out of sight. Come here, bud. A lot of times you can tell the attitude of these smallmouth just by the color. When they're real bright black, you know, or real dark black colored, those fish are real aggressive. They're gonna bite almost every time, just a guarantee, when those fish are real dark colored. When they're real light colored, they're just kind of passive. So, you know, those black ones really stand out. You can see them really well. You need to be sure to get a lure in front of those black ones. I really like throwing these smaller swim baits on a spinning rod. The reason is, a lot of times I need to throw into the wind, make super long casts in this clear water. With a spinning rod, I don't ever have to worry about backlashes. I put braid with a fluorocarbon leader, and I can literally throw that stuff a long, long ways. Very, very important. There's one. Oh, that feels like a good one too. That's the kind of fish right there you catch, and bigger, on transitions. Right there's where it drops, just from shallow to deep. Come here, buddy. Come up here. Come up here. Oh, I got him. I threw my bait off too. Nice fish. They're fun to catch. Shallow fishing like this, you know, I said, is so visual that, you know, a lot of people think, well, I really don't need a GPS up front, but that's not true. When you have really windy conditions, or say a little cloud cover, or any of those things that I can't see in the water is good, that's where my electronics come into, you know, big time play, especially my trails. You know, my Lowrance, I can just put a new trail on it every day that I go. They're different colors, and I can make the same exact drift. If it was sunny and calm, it wouldn't be no big deal. I'd be able to see, but it's obviously not that way. And I can just come right down this same pathway with that trail on there. Golly, biggin. Where'd it go? Where'd it go? Where'd it go? Go get it. Go get it. She's going towards it. Got her. That's why you have a follow-up bait right there. That fish followed my swim bait in, and I just tossed that tube out there real quick, and boom, she hit it. Oh, she ate that tube too. Nice fish. That's why she followed my swim bait in. My tail was curled over, but I had that follow-up bait immediately ready. That's so important, and it's so important to be watching your bait the whole time. You know, have a good pair of glasses and watch that thing the whole time, because there's gonna be times they won't commit. And if you can have a follow-up bait, you know, I always have a tube, a fluke stick, and a drop shot, you know, and it just depends on how high in that water column that fish is for each bait. If it's something that's way out there, I'm gonna usually use that tube. You know, if it's something that's fairly close and it's a fluke stick or the drop shot, if the fish is on the bottom, it's gonna be the drop shot. If the fish is still up pretty high, it's gonna be that fluke stick. Very important to have a follow-up bait. Have something rigged, ready to go on the deck that you don't have to get out of the rod box, unhook it off the reel, have it laying over the side that you can just pick up and fire out there really quick in the direction that fish is headed. There's one. Oh, that feels like a nice one. Oh yeah. Stay on there, baby. Right here's where a lot of people lose these fish. You know, once you're got that fish hooked, I loosen my drag way off. There's nothing for that fish to break your line on out here, nothing at all. Just take your time with them, don't rush them. People get these great big fish on like this and they do all they can to, so excited to get their hands on them. And that's when they're gonna break these fish off, is when they're really, really close to the boat. Oh, yeah. There's a nice one. So beautiful, beautiful fish. Man, that's fun.
Here's a fast fact for you. You want to catch big fish? Well, throwing a big top water bait, such as the Whopper Plopper 130, is the way to go. You know, but another thing, when you're throwing a big top water bait, trying to catch a big fish, you got to know when to throw it. When you're fishing in the bright sunny days, you make sure that you're using a shad pattern, something in the clear or a white, and then on those dark cloudy days, or first thing in the morning or late in the afternoon, you definitely want to go with something really dark, like the black color like this one. So throwing a big top water bait will catch you big fish, but throwing the right color at the same time is going to catch you even bigger ones.
Kevin Van Dam has figured out the best way to coax finicky bass into biting is to offer them an irresistible bite-sized morsel. And the soft plastic jerkbait is just the trick. It's today's Bass School 101.
Got it. Right at the boat. One came up schooling on that shad, and I just reeled my caffeine shad right in there and got him. You know, one thing, if you fish long enough, you're gonna come across situations where the bass are really, really picky. And one time that I find extremely hard is when they're chasing shad, when they're on bait, and they just get so selective to the real thing that it's really hard to trick them. Well, I've got something that I've found that really works well for me. That's that little 4-inch caffeine shad. Now, there's a lot of different ways you can fish it. You know, I've got it Texas rigged here today, and I've got it on a little bit bigger hook. You can change the size of the hook to slow it down or speed it up. You can fish it fast, burning it on top. You can slow twitch it because it has a great horizontal sink to it. It looks like a dying bait fish. My favorite color, that ghost shad right here. In clear water, it's so natural, it's real subtle, doesn't have a lot of flash to it, and it's small like the shad that these bass are chasing. I like to rig it on this little Mustad grip pin hook. It's got a little keeper that keeps it from sliding down. So if I'm fishing it fast, that way, you know, it's not gonna pull down on the shank of the hook. Rig it so it's perfectly straight, right hook on the top. That way, like I say, that plastic is not gonna slide down the hook. That bait right there looks so alive in the water, it looks like a real shad. I like to throw it on spinning equipment, and this 8-pound braid really helps. You know, the one thing is, with that light braid, I can cast this thing a mile. So if you see one come up and break, you can definitely reach them with it. You know, black that line out, it's very invisible, even in clear water, and you can really get a good hook set with that, you know, low stretch braid out there. So if you're really faced with one of those situations where you can't get them to bite a top water, they don't bite other things, especially when it gets slick and calm out, this little caffeine shad twitched around on a spinning rod with light line can be money in the bank. I couldn't get them to hit anything until I started using these finesse baits. Got to be sneaky to catch them.
Hello, we're coming to you today from the outdoor world in San Jose, California. This place is incredible. You got to come out and see it. Today, Davey Height's going to show us how he uses 3 different crankbaits to fish 3 different zones. That's today's in-depth. Then, At Defoe takes us to school on which soft plastic shapes he uses for the different seasons of the year. That's today's Bass School 101. But first, We asked 2012 Bassmasters Classic champion Chris Lane what his 5 favorite lures are. That's going to be today's Fishing in 5.
All right, you have a choice. You get to take 5 lures out on the lake with you. That's it, only 5 out of your tackle box. And for number 1, my choice would be the live motion drop dead crawl. The great thing about this bait is it goes down into the mat and it's got the swim tail legs that go up and down, up and down. It's like little paddle tail legs on each end of it. The fish can't resist it. So when you're talking about punching mats, when you're talking about so many different styles of soft plastic, make sure you use a smaller one, because a smaller plastic, getting it into those mats and getting it down in there where the fish are, that is a big key. Number 2, the pig and jig. Why the pig and jig? It's a black and blue jig. This pig and jig right here will catch you big fish, hands down. There's so many people that have done it before us, and the pig and jig still holds true to catching big bass. Usually a 3/4 to a 1 ounce is what I love to flip, either in vegetation down in Florida or by boat docks on Lake Gunnersville. Man, my number 2 bait, the pig and jig. You know, what's so great about it is it catches big fish. You know, you got a big skirt right here. It's a big profile. The bass think it's like a big bluegill. You got a chunk trailer on the back of it and 65-pound braided line, because you will get some big fish. Number 2 bait, the pig and jig. Number 3, one of my favorites as well, the swimming frog. You know, the swimming frog has been around for about 15 years and it catches fish. It's just an awesome way for you to go out, catch fish, have fun, and let the kids catch fish and have fun as well. Swimming frogs, man, number 3 on my favorite baits. You can catch a lot of fish, you can catch good fish, big fish, small fish. The explosion on it is what really gets me. Number 3, swimming frogs. So number 4 is the drop shot. One great thing about a drop shot is it's easy and anybody can do it. You can go out there, you can chunk this thing out there, wiggle it back real slow and catch fish. It's a finesse style type fishing, and for slick, calm, sunny days, that's what you need sometimes. So you never know what conditions are gonna be dealt with. I could catch one right in here. Man, I missed that one. You know, drop shotting. It's one of my favorite ways to catch fish. Number 4 on my list of the top 5. We're gonna let this fish go. It's a spotted bass, beautiful spot. All this is a weight on the bottom and then a small drop shot hook up here on the top of the line. The great thing about this is you can catch fish any way you want to, on the edge of grass, on bridge pilings, on a little river ledge like where that one just came from. You know, you have your weight down here and you've got your hook up here, smaller hook. And what you want to do is you want to make sure that that worm wiggles and not the weight. So you just take a finesse style straight worm. There's all kinds of them out there. Just take it, you hook it on there, and boom, you're ready to go. Number 4, the drop shot. Number 5 is kind of interesting. Number 5 is what I grew up doing, what my brothers grew up doing, what our family did, and that is the double horse. The double horse has been around for a long, long time. And one thing about the double horse is it flat out catches fish, and has for years and years and years. You know, when we were kids growing up, my grandpa, he ordered 350 of these, I believe, from Bass Pro, and on the invoice said, yes, this man wants 350 double horses. And this is all he threw, and this is what we were raised on. You know, one of the things that makes this bait so effective is the 2 spinners. You got one on the front and one on the back. And working it very slow, it just leaves that little shimmy that them bass are down there looking at. And I remember the days, you know, I haven't done it to this one yet, but I've got some work to do. We would sit in the motorhome with my grandpa, cut the ends of the propellers, file them down just right for the tournament the next day. The Devil Horse. Thank you, Grandpa. So there you have it. Those are my 5 favorite baits to take out on the water. Go to Bass Pro, get you some, and get on the water and have a good time doing it.
Sometimes the bass can be holding in a single depth zone. Other times they're going to be top to bottom, just like we have here. Today, Davey Height's going to show us how he uses 3 different crankbaits to fish 3 different zones. That's today's In Depth.
We're in South Georgia today. It's June, it's hot. I'm gonna show you 3 crankbaits that you've got to have when you go fishing in the summer. A DT6, a DT10, and a DT16. You need different baits to be able to effectively fish shallow to deep. See the way he ate that? Look at that. He likes that, doesn't he? You know, when I'm fishing crankbaits, you know, you don't just chunk and wind them. You do a lot of different things with the speed of your retrieve. And I like to say there's 3 things you always need to do with crankbait. You need to reel it slow, you need to reel it fast, and then stop and go. But you know, to kind of make it rhyme, fast, slow, stop and go. Try those 3 different methods as you're fishing a crankbait. Don't just reel it at the same speed always. If you notice then, I made the bait stop about twice. The first time I did it on this point, and that fish ate it, and you could tell by where it had it in its mouth that it really liked what I was doing. So I'm gonna do some stop and go retrieve now. He hit it and then came back. Feels like a good one. You know, I missed a fish there. Could be the same fish, but a lot of times when you're offshore cranking like this, it could be a small school of fish or even a big school of fish right there, but there's definitely more than one bite. And so you need to be sure and make that cast again. It could be a little small area the size, half the size of this boat. But the boat drifts away while you're landing a fish, but I'm gonna line the boat back up and make that same cast again. It could be a group of fish. So this is the DT6. This is a shallower bait I throw. Runs up to 6 feet deep. I fish it a lot from 3 to 6 foot depth range. Great bait, but only 6 feet. God. Ah. Yeah, I'm gonna make a little color change. I've missed 2 or 3 fish. This is basically a shad pattern, but I'm gonna use a little different tone. Both shad type baits, but just a little different color. I missed 2 or 3 fish in a row that I know they were bites. I'm gonna put on a little different color bait, see if it makes a difference. Yep, it made a difference. First cast. Couple 2. They're all good. Now, you know, just little subtle changes like that I've learned over the years, just a slight color change, both shad patterns, but it means missing a fish versus catching a fish. Sometimes we get caught up in just trying to make numbers of casts rather than really thinking about what you need to do to make a difference in those casts. And just a slight color change like that can mean, you know, winning a tournament or being middle of the pack. And I get excited and I want my bait in the water all the time, just like any other tournament fisherman does, I think. But you need to slow down and kind of think about what's going on. And I knew something wasn't right when I missed 2 or 3 fish with that bait. It didn't take much of a change, but just a little different colors, all they needed. You just stair step as you come off this point, and depending on the point, some are flatter than others, but this one tapers off, you know, at a pretty good angle, you know, maybe 25 to 30 degrees. And you can see the shallow water where you can see the bottom up there. You can see the red. and then you lose sight of that, it drops down to about 4 or 5 feet. You can't see the bottom anymore. And then you have an area that's probably about 30 feet. It goes from 5 to about 10 or 12 feet deep. And then after about 40 feet from the shoreline, it goes down, you know, to 12 to 16, 17 feet of water. And those fish can move up and down. When they're aggressive, they'll be up shallow, wanting to feed. They'll get shallower and they'll get closer to try to, you know, where the bluegills are, along with some shad. So it just stair steps down. And there's no way you can take one crankbait and fish it effectively. You've got to have different baits that you can run and get to the bottom or real close to the bottom. Big plug, big bass, come on. There he is. Out there where the big ones live. You know, I fished an underwater point here, and I've caught quite a few fish on these 6 to 10 foot baits. And you know, there are some fish at that depth, but this underwater point is just so textbook where fish would want to be this time of year, out there where the shad are. And I fished the depth range where I've caught those other fish, and I picked up this 16 foot bait and threw out there just a little deeper and immediately caught a fish. And you know, you just need, if you're going to crankbait fish, you need several baits where you can cover different areas of the water column. You know, 5 to 20 feet deep in the summertime, you need to be able to cover all that. You can't do it with one bait. You try to use a deep diver and throw in 5 feet of water, you're gonna be hung all the time. And that's where a lot of people get frustrated and they lose baits. But tie you on at least 3 crankbaits to run different depths and you'll catch more fish.
Crankbaits are one of my favorite lures for trying to cover a lot of different depth zones. The reason? Because they're so efficient. If you choose the right lure, you can get to that particular zone and keep that lure in the strike zone for the whole time. Whether the bass are down on the bottom or they're suspended up in the water column, a crankbait is one of the best tools that you can use when you're trying to find fish in certain depth zones.
You know, when I'm crankbait fishing, I'm searching for cover. And I'm paying attention to my electronics for the depth that the boat is sitting in, but also pay attention to the bait that I'm casting. If I cast a bait up there and it's not able to get down to the cover, then I want to pick up a bait that'll run deeper and I cast to try to find that cover. On the flip side, if I cast up there and I've got a DT16 and it digs in the bottom in the first crank, I need to be throwing a different bait. So you always position the boat to try to effectively use the bait that you're using and touch the cover or the bottom, whatever you're trying to reach with that bait. And so you've got to be thinking about what you're doing and the direction you're casting. This is my deep diver. It's a DT16. I love fishing that depth range, 10 to 16 feet deep. You can cover a lot of water with this bait offshore. You know, this is probably the most popular of the DT series. With this bait, the biggest mistake that most people make, they try to fish it a little too shallow. Instead of throwing that DT6 in that 5 to 6 foot range, they throw this bait. You get hung up because the bait is diving and digging too much. Get hung up, you lose a bait that you just paid 10 bucks for, and you quit throwing crankbaits. Don't throw this bait. Typically, you don't want to be throwing this bait any less than about 8 feet deep, 8 to 16. Oh, baby. God. Oh, that's Open your mouth for me, baby. That's what we want right there. You know, just being persistent with a crankbait. I came through here just a few minutes ago on the same underwater point. I didn't catch anything, but I noticed on my graph that there was some shad and a few fish out there deeper. So I come back with a DT16 and look what you get. Love it. DT16, baby. This is the DT10, my mid-range bait. You know, I use this bait a lot because I fish a lot of crankbaits between 6 and 10 feet deep. You know, it's not your shallow runners, not your deep, but DT10, you can see this one's been chewed on a lot by some bass. You know, when you crank any of these crankbaits, you want to make contact with the bottom or the cover that you're fishing. That's why it's so important to know the depth range that you're trying to target.
There he is. Big one. Oh, that's a good one. Oh my God.
The way I got him hooked, I thought it was a giant. He ain't bad though, he's not bad. DT10. You know, I use several different rods when I'm crankbait fishing. A longer rod obviously gives you more leverage, you can make longer casts. I like a medium action rod when I'm crankbait fishing. I use glass rods for the big heavy baits, use a graphite rod, but a medium action that's got a lot of tip if I'm using the smaller baits. You know, there's a lot of different personal preferences when it comes to crankbaits, but I think it's a given that you really need to use a softer action when you're fishing these baits.
Fishy, fishy, fishy. Come and bite my hook. Fishy, fishy, fishy. Nice, nice. Nice tournament fish. Oh, he had to dance a little bit for us when we let him go.
When you get out here on any body of water and you kind of get in tune with the depth range that the fish want to be at and learn where the little ditches are and creek channel bends and that sort of thing, it sure makes it fun. So many people say fishing's luck, but there's a little more to it than that. So, you know, if you're going to go crankbait fishing, you need at least 3 baits to cover different depths that you're fishing. I've had a lot of fun today catching fish on a DT6, a DT10, and a 16. Don't forget, you need to cover the whole water column. Those fish will move throughout the day from day to day. But if you've got at least 3 baits on, you can find where they are and catch them.
Fat versus skinny with your square bills. It really depends on what you're going to try to do. If I'm going to try to fish wood, then I want the fat one. Why? It's a question of buoyancy. If I'm fishing around a lot of wood, then I want the buoyancy. I want the fat one because I want it bouncing off that wood, deflects off better, you don't get hung up near as much. The skinny one doesn't have as much buoyancy. Then I'm fishing it around rock. I want to keep it near the bottom. It doesn't have as much buoyancy. It's not trying to float up off the bottom. So understand fat versus skinny when you fish in your square bills.
No doubt soft plastics are killer baits to catch bass, but are you using the right shape for the situation you're in? Today, Ott Defoe is going to clear up the mystery of what plastics to choose in today's Bass School 101.
When you walk into Bass Pro Shops and you're trying to pick out a soft bait shape, it can be a little overwhelming at times because there's a lot of different ones to choose from. I want to help you pick out the one that's going to be best for the time of the year that you're going fishing and what those bass are doing then and why that shape will be the best one for you. Let's start off with the springtime. For me in the spring, I want to pick a bait that I'm going to call a slim style creature bait, something that looks a little bit more like a lizard. This bait puts off a lot of disturbance under the water. It's got legs, it's got appendages, it's got different things to move the water, help those fish find it, help them see it. And if it gets close to their nest, they're not going to like it and you're going to know about it. That's a good thing. After that, once those fish get done spawning, they're going to be a little bit more finicky. A straight tail worm is going to be the best way to go then. I can fish this on a shaky head, I can fish it on a Texas rig, or my favorite way to fish a straight tail worm in the post spawn is actually with a wacky rig. That system really catches a lot of bass. It doesn't matter if they're still guarding fry or they're just getting done spawning. Man, a wacky rig straight tail worm is extremely effective during the post spawn. Now once those fish get moved back out and it's summertime, it's all about something big. A 10-inch Berkeley power worm is hard to beat in the summertime. Those bass want a big meal and a 10-inch power worm is just that. It's a great way to catch a big bass. For me in the summertime, I'm going to fish this either on a Texas rig, a Carolina rig, or on a jig head. Something that I can rig that bait up, I can cast it a long way, and I can drag it back through those deep water haunts where those big fish are living. And then for me, the last shape that I've got is a bulky style creature bait. Something that's got a little bit of appendages on the back, that's got some action. And for me, my favorite one is a Berkeley Havoc Pit Boss. Now this bait, I use it all different times of the year. It's a bait that I'm going to use primarily Texas rig, flip it in around any kind of cover that I think those bass may be fishing in. So whenever you're trying to figure out exactly what bait shape and soft plastics that you need, use my tips here, and I know it'll help you catch more bass. Hello everyone, and welcome to the gorgeous Bass Pro Shops outdoor world here in Round Rock, Texas. There's a change taking place in some of our nation's lakes. Tim Horton examines how you have to adapt when fishing in the presence of the blueback herring. It's a game changer. Today's in depth. Then Rick Clunn shows us why it may be worth all the extra effort to go upstream and fish below the dam. Rick is coming up in today's Bass School 101. But first up, Davey Hite. We asked Davey what 4 things he does differently than everybody else when fishing topwater. This is Fishing in 5.
Oh, he's after it. Ooh, hit it again. Hit it again. I got it. We got him with several hooks. That's what you want there in a tournament. Just have him, just slightly have him with all 3 sets. Not a wall hanger for sure, but just a beautiful, beautiful fish. Not a mark on him. If you had to say if I had to say a favorite way to fish, you know, it's got to be top water fishing, because it's just the excitement of the bite. And you know, that was a cool bite there that I just had, and hopefully we'll get some more today. I'm fishing a walking bait. This is a Rashi Top Walker 13. A really good bait. The fish are suspended. It's fall of the year. One thing I do differently with this bait is I fish it faster than a lot of people do. If I get the fish pinpointed, you know, I'll slow down and really walk this bait slowly. But these fish are suspended in this deeper water and they roam with the bait. And I think it's really, really important to fish, even this topwater walking bait, fish it fast and cover water. And then once you find some fish, you can slow down then. But, you know, cover water, cover water. You see the big boil? Straight behind my lure. He rolled at it twice. Oh, we got it. Oh, baby. It's all about being patient. That's a dang striper, I think. Hey, he made good footage, though. It's fun to catch him. We're not in a tournament. Let's get him up here. You know, these stripers are roaming in this lake like a lot of other lakes. They're roaming around out here on these flats, chasing this bait, just like the largemouth bass are. And this wake bait is really good, but I finally got in a area where it's most effective, where the water's calm and the water's clear. This is a great, great way to catch fish. Spring, summer, and fall. A lot of people use this bait just in the springtime, but you know, spring, summer, and fall, anytime that you get a topwater bite going on, this is a really, really good bait. You need calm water so they can see the ripple from this wake bait, hence the name wake bait. The whole key with me being able to catch these fish in this clear water in the fall is 2 things. Number 1, cover water, and number 2, fish that bait fast so those fish don't see the bait as good. And you know, they get pressured all year long, and especially right now there's been multiple really big tournaments, and these fish, you know, you don't fish crazy fast, but keep that bait moving along. Instead of like in the spring, you might walk a little bit, stop, walk a little bit, stop. Just keep it moving along. Oh, golly, ball. Missed him. Throw a little follow-up bait out there, maybe get lucky. Oh, wow, time it hit the water. Oh, I thought he was done, but he's not. He's just a fat, healthy fish. All right. Nice, beautiful fish. Like I say, look at the colors. Just a gorgeous, gorgeous fish. Hey, here's another bait that I think is my new favorite follow-up bait. It's a gliding jig. VMC came out with this bait just this year. It's basically a willow leaf spinnerbait blade with a good wide gap hook, 3/16 of an ounce here. And then a small piece of plastic here. I've got the tail of a D-shad on here, but you can use a Senko. You don't want to overpower the blade with too much plastic, so use a small plastic on there. Great follow-up bait. If you look at it in the water, the way it flutters down, very enticing for a follow-up bait. The way I like to fish this gliding jig is cast it out, and I keep it up on the surface and just kind of skip it across the water and kill it, and it flutters down like a dying bait fish. It's really a neat finesse follow-up bait that I've just started using this year, and I've caught quite a few fish on it. Got it. You know, like I said earlier, topwater fishing is fun, whether you're in a tournament or just out having fun on a Saturday afternoon. You may have noticed I fish those baits a little differently than a lot of people do. Give it a try, and I think it'll help you catch more fish too.
Introduction of a different kind of bait fish, the blueback herring. Bass in these lakes are starting to change the way they feed. Tim Horton explains exactly what's going on in today's In Depth.
Got a cool warning. Cooler temperatures. So we got a sunny day, that's a good thing. We're gonna talk about that in a little while. And the importance of knowing the differences of bait fish the bass are feeding on. How they relate to things like sun, clouds, heat, cool water, all of those factors are important to know. I'm gonna give you 3 facts about blueback herring. Number 1, they're becoming a main forage base for the bass all throughout the Southeast. Number 2, they react different to the threadfin and the gizzard shad that we're used to. One of the main things they do is they go to the surface when the sun is out. We're on Smith Lake, which is just north of the metropolis of Birmingham, Alabama. And this lake, about 10 years ago, got introduced to the blueback herring. All right, what we've done, we've chosen a main big pocket that has a big deep drain in the middle of it. And a lot of times at nighttime, these bluebacks will move to the very backs of these coves. They move a lot more than threadfin and gizzard shad. They'll move a lot more throughout the day. So we're gonna sit here and listen and look and see if we see any breaking action as the sun starts to get on the surface. Oh yeah, look how the bluebacks, what a school shaft, from 40 to 20. Everything's been deeper, they're starting to come up shallower. That's awesome. The threadfin and gizzard shad do not roam as much. They usually get up against something, but more importantly, when the sun comes out, they go deeper. That's right the opposite with the bluebacks. They like the sun, they get up right on close to the surface when the sun's out. It really changes fishing from what we're used to. What's happening is, these fish are not up there right on the bank like you would think. Topwater fishing, you're thinking, man, I gotta be 8 foot or less. That's not the deal here. We're sitting out right now, 62 feet of water, throwing over 30 and 40 feet, and these fish are on these big pods of bluebacks coming up, and we're drawing them up on the surface with these topwater lures. Keeping our eyes open and listening really good for breaking action. You know, it's like anything else. We're all creatures of habit, and we fish memories so much. You know, we get out and we do things that have worked in the past. But if the forage base changes, you got to change with it. And these blueback herring lakes are no exception. You got to change with them if you're going to catch the fish. They're definitely healthy for the lake as far as forage base goes for the bass. You know, the long-term effects are yet to be seen. You know, there's a lot of debate on how aggressive these blueback herring are and how they attack even, you know, the species that are normally here, the threadfin and the gizzard shad. How are they going to affect their fry and what they hatch out, and what's the long-term effect? But I can tell you the short-term effect is the bass are really healthy, they're built really good. Oh, that's a tub. That's a tub. Man, look at them pretty spotted bass. Gorgeous fish. Man, he smoked that Z-Dog. Look at this one right here. That is a spotted bass. Look at that tub. That's a 4-pounder. Man. Tell you what, he smoked that Z-Dog. You know, the big thing with these blueback shad, blueback herring, is to really keep your eyes out. Look at that, just gorgeous. Man, that is awesome. That's what I'm talking about right there. Gorgeous. You see him go down 15 feet in that clear water. You know, the thing about it, these fish, and I'm seeing them on my graph, you know, they're down there in 30 to 40 feet. And they come up on the bluebacks. The bluebacks change this place up and make it more of these fish roam. You know, they are in wolf packs. They almost feed the way stripers do. If some of you guys are familiar with how stripers are on a big lake, when you get bluebacks on a lake, it turns the bass into that, because bluebacks do not hold on cover. They just roam and then they push them up. That's pretty cool. I love watching those strikes. The blueback herring can really get large in size. It can get up to 16 inches long, and they're found all along the Atlantic seaboard from Nova Scotia all the way down to the St. Johns River in Florida. Now what happens when they spawn? They come inland in some of the coastal rivers, therefore being able to live in fresh water. That's why you're seeing them in these lakes. Now what happened early on, a lot of the striper guys seen that they were great forage baits to live bait fish with, so they would bring them into a lot of the lakes around Santee Cooper, Lake Murray, and in South Carolina, some of those areas where the striped bass are really prevalent. Now what they didn't know was when they released what was left over after a day of fishing, the herring started reproducing in these lakes and really grabbed hold and became a mainstay. And the result of that is it really changed the lakes and how these people fish for them. A lot of these herring were moved by accident, maybe some of it on purpose, but I can tell you it really changed the fishing, and the fish are built a lot bigger now. The future will tell if these herring will be damaging to our lakes or for a healthy resource for the fish for years to come. And in the meantime, I will say this, we've seen tournament weights skyrocket on what it's taking to win here. Now what does that tell me? It tells me two things. First of all, you gotta fish these lakes different. It's a completely different deal than threadfin and gizzard shad. But the weights are taking a lot more to win tournaments. It used to take 15 pounds a day to win here. Now it's over 20 for everything. So for the time being, it looks like a healthy move, but the future will tell what the blueback herring will do to these lakes. This is amazing to see right here. In gin clear water as Smith Lake is, in 80 foot of water, these shad are right on the surface. It's amazing. Threadfin, gizzard shad go really deep in clear water, but not bluebacks. They're gonna come up to that sun. That's what they like.
One major thing you need to know about blueback herring is just how much faster these bait fish are than traditional bait fish, such as shad or bluegill. Once I learned just how much faster swimming the blueback herring is, I started speeding up the pace of my bait and the way that I fish that back to the boat. Blueback herring primarily inhabit lakes that have extremely clear water. Being able to fish that bait back to the boat quicker gets you more of a reaction strike and helps you catch more of those fish that are really keyed in on those herring. They're used to that bait fish going really fast. You want your bait to do exactly the same, and it'll help you catch more bass.
For the past 10 years, blueback herring have been in Smith Lake, and their presence continues to grow each year. Let's run out there. What you're gonna see me doing here is when these fish come up, they may be 200 or 300 yards away. It's a good slick day. We want to crank up and run to them. If you try to do it on your trolling motor, they're going to be down by the time you get there. Throw your life jacket on, crank the big engine up, and run over there as fast as you can. That's a good one. Oh, that's a tub right there. Look at that one. Oh, man. Oh, he's barely hooked. Oh, he come off. He was barely hooked. Oh, man. Another 4-pounder. That is so cool. Hey, we got our hands on him. We had our fun out of him anyway. Hey, let's talk about the setup for fishing this topwater. This is 16-pound supernatural monofilament made by Sunline, and that is very important. You don't want to use the fluorocarbon because it's going to sink and not allow that top water to run properly. This is a 6-4-1 team loose reel. I like high gear ratios anytime I'm fishing top water. It's paired with a 7-3 white ice ducket rod. It has a good soft tip, and that's perfect for walking the dog on these type lures. Now the lure, this is an Azuma Z-Dog in the mirror shad color. I really like it because it's transparent, and there are a lot of other colors that are transparent I like. Purple Rain is a good one. And on those cloudy days, I like something a little brighter with this chrome pattern. This one's called Blue Bahama. Regardless of what top water you're using, get one that has a little bit of a cup in the lip, and that's going to allow that lure to be able to throw water and create a lot more service action. Those bass are down there in 20, 30 foot deep looking up, and they see that commotion, and boom, they jump up on it in a hurry. Oh, this is a big one. Oh, look at this one. Look at this one. Oh, this is a tub right here. That is an absolute giant spotted bass. Oh my gosh, look at this one right there. Oh my goodness, look at that one. Absolute giant spotted bass. I'll show you guys something. When you hold a big fish like this, don't take them and invert them. If you want to invert them and get a good horizontal picture, protect them by under their weight. That is a massive spot. Look at that. Sweet. That's a ton right there. Oh man, that's so cool. You know, one thing to keep in mind, obviously, is the winter time comes, winter is no different. These bluebacks are going to move to the very backs. In other words, they're going to stay in this clear water in that 30 to 40 feet, but they're going to get in the very, very backs of the pockets. Now you see threadfin and gizzard shad do that in the fall, but in the winter they come back out. The bluebacks do not. They stay in the very backs of these V's. So you got to adjust with them, but they're completely different than the shad we're used to fishing. Some of the other alternatives are like a fish head spin or putting a big jig head like a scrounger head on a soft plastic swim bait and going down to the fish. But in this clear water, if you can call them up, your success ratio is going to be much better. There we go. Oh, there's some with him. There's 2 or 3 with him. Oh, goodness. Oh, there was 2 or 3 with him. Look at that one. Look at that tub. Oh. Look at this spot. Oh, this is a giant. Oh, goodness. Look at that one. Oh, that is an absolute giant right there. That's a 5-pounder. Wow. Hey, I'm gonna tell you, change up your tactics. You're gonna find that you can catch giant spotted bass, largemouth, whatever they may be. Bright blue skies, look at this, middle of the day sunny, giant spotted bass. Don't be afraid to make a change. Oh, I love it.
One of the things I really like are these things on the end of my rods. They're called cushions, and they really help protect my ribs. You know, when I'm setting the hook a bunch, I got a lot of padding right there. It adds sensitivity to my rod, and it also gives you something to really grab a hold of when you're going to make two-handed casts. But the best thing about it is it's going to help that rod float. You know, I've had a lot of rods through my years that somehow get kicked out of my boat, jerked over by fish. Maybe you got kids fishing in the boat and they accidentally drop one, but it'll keep your rod floating. You can always go back out there and get it.
There's an often overlooked area on many lakes with a variety of opportunities waiting for you below the dam. Here's Rick Clun with today's Bass School 101.
Today we're actually going to fish what I consider one of the things that's kind of overlooked in a lot of our, especially bigger lakes, and it's below the dams, especially the smallmouth, spotted bass, and even largemouth really do use these areas, and usually pretty big schools. That's the key word, schools. People look for schools to fish all over the lake. One of the easiest places to find big schools are below dams. There's tremendous concentration of all species up here, including the bait fish that they're going to be feeding on, and that's why they're here. There is so much food up here. Smallmouth. Smallmouth love it down in this kind of water, because they like current, They like the amount of fish that are down there. How you fish below dams is really a key of learning what's below dams that will block current. Most of these fish are current oriented, and they really feed mostly when the current's moving, but they have maybe a half a dozen places below each dam where really they block current and they will congregate, you know, what we call eddies. It may be a point. It may be underwater rock piles out here in the middle that you'll have to find with your depth finder. It may be individual stumps or individual big rocks. The other thing is cuts that come into the river close to the dam. What happens with these cuts is that when they start moving water, it sucks water out of those creeks real fast. That's a current break. Oh, you wanted a crawfish. Well, all we got to catch now is a spotted bass. That's fishing below the dams. You know, really, again, remember, when you come up here, there's usually only about half a dozen places that these fish are really going to use when that current's running to stay out of the current. And that's really the key. Some of them you can see, but some of them you can't. Like this one's under the water, you're going to have to find with your depth finder. But that's where most of the fish are going to be, especially when the current moves, and that's the time to be there.
This is the beautiful Bass Pro Shops outdoor world in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. We have a great show for you today. Kevin Van Dam is going to show us how he uses a lipless crankbait on fish that are very hard to find. Don't miss today's in-depth. Then, if you're considering buying a new rod and reel combo, Davey Height has some options for you to consider in Bass School 101. But first, Rick Clunn's going to show us it's not which boat docks you fish, but more importantly, how you approach them and your angle of attack. Here comes Fishing in 5.
No matter where you go in the country, docks can play a big role in your fishing success. It's one of the major man-made structures and habitat that holds bass throughout the country. But one of the biggest mistakes I see in fishermen is what I call boat control. It's not talked about a lot. In other words, how you control your boat in relationship to your target. Let's break it down into kind of a common language here. And that is, you've got the walkway of the dock, which I call the simple part of the dock, okay? And then you got the end of the dock is where the main deck is, or sometimes where the boathouse is, and that's what I call the complex part of the dock. And the fish can use all of it. The complex, obviously, is usually in a little bit deeper water, and obviously the walkway is, various steps leading all the way to the bank. Here's the whole idea. How big a strike zone do you think that dock is providing for you, and what kind of cast you can make to keep your lure in that strike zone the greatest percentage of each cast? Visualize where you think the fish is, but don't cast to him. I want to cast past that corner as far as I can and then come to that corner and kind of down the side of the dock. Okay, now obviously we got a pontoon boat that extends out a little bit. Don't be confused when they say be an accurate caster that you're hitting a target. You're not. You're casting past your target always, and then you're coming, to the target. And then you start looking for the hard shots. Don't take the hard shots first, because you're going to screw up on some of the hard shots. And if you screw up, then you basically have ruined the whole dock. You spooked the whole fish. You've got to get in and get your bait. But here's the hard shot. You're going to go up under the dock. So there may be multiple hard shots. This one basically, it's just, all I really have is that one hard shot under it. Now when I get on this back side, I will have the other corner. Those are the easy shots. Take those first into the area. We're dealing with a shady situation. Cloud cover, what that does, it allows the fish to be a little less predictable where they're going to be. Now that I've worked the complex end of the dock, if the water depth allows, I'm not going to quit. I'm going to work the simple part of the dock. But what I want to do is I want to cast under the dock past my target again, like I said earlier. So I'm past my target. Now I want to come by the little pilings that are holding up the walkway. Same thing here. Go back all the way into the dock, come past the target. And so I'm going to try to work that whole walkway as far as I can get the boat. The fish will tell you what part of the dock they're using. Until they do that, I'm going to go through that same approach that I just went through on every single dock. We started off this morning with cloud cover. You know, later in the day we got a little bit of sunshine, you know, and we started seeing these shadows, and the shadows again tends to give me a better idea where these fish might be sitting. Also, we moved into the wind, and the wind is always your friend.
This is a little bit different than a lot of the stuff we've been working. It's been more protected, and the wind has come up now a little bit, and I've got into these windier docks. Hopefully that's what'll keep these fish a little more aggressive up in the middle of the day. And every dock's different. I mean, that's why each one time you approach one, you have to evaluate, okay, what's the best approach? What's the complex part of the dock? Again, what's the simple part of the dock? What are gonna be my best angles to keep my bait close to the dock? And the complex area is probably where the fish spend most of their time. And that's why you tend to wanna work it a little with a few more casts than you would, you know, the other area. But each one has a little different features. Being patient, waiting for the right angles is again still key. You know, I'm probing these docks, and I'm with more of a power presentation. Yes, you can finesse, but you still got to keep those same factors in mind. Where should my cast go? What is the best angle that I can keep me near that strike zone a longer period of time? You got to assume every time you go out and every cast you make, the fish is not aggressive, and your cast has to come right by the target. You know, once you kind of get tuned into how to fish these docks and then you start catching fish, really start paying attention to where those fish are coming from. This is one of the windier docks I have fished, so that might be something that keeps these fish up in the day when the sun starts to get out a little more aggressive. And that's what you're always looking for, is what conditions might keep them a little bit more aggressive. And in this case, it may be the wind. You know, docks are one of the most common pieces of habitat that you will see in almost any lake throughout this country. And boat control is really the whole key to fishing docks. Don't waste casts thrown at the dock. Make those ever cast their count. For me, that's a great day. Little guy, but he tells the story.
If you don't catch fish on these lipless crankbaits up shallow, don't give up. Go deep. KVD shows us an unusual way to fish these in today's In-Depth.
There you go. Oh, got him. Got him. Gosh. Snatched it out of that grass and he smoked it. He should have had it all the way in his mouth, but he did. You know, anytime you got deeper grass, the bass are going to be related to it. You know, it's late summer and I'm seeing a lot of bait, and I haven't been getting a lot of bites. So, you know, kind of ripping this 2-tap red-eye shad, you know, yo-yoing it really can be real effective. So it's a really neat bait because it's got tungsten in it, and you can hear it's got that real loud sound. So it falls real good. It fishes a lot better when you're trying to fish deep like this. So we'll see if we can find a school of fish out here outside a little bit more. I've just, you know, the shallow bite's been off. So, you know, one of the techniques that I know is gonna work when I'm looking for offshore fish is ripping or yo-yoing that red-eye shad. It's just, they cannot handle that bait. You know, the sound and the vibration when you rip it up, and then the way that it flutters down, it's just like, it's like a dying bait fish. They cannot handle that action. You know, we started out this morning just, you know, fishing shallow. I threw a frog for a little bit and didn't have much there. Threw a swim jig because it looked real good for that. You know, I caught a fish on that, caught one on a spinner bait. As I started to just get out a little deeper and start looking at these deeper edges, that's when I started seeing bait, started seeing shad flipping, balls of bait on the graph. It's tough, it's late summer, water's warm, and these fish really aren't real active, so I gotta try to make them react, and ripping this red-eye shad is a good way to do that. So we'll see what we can't put together. You know, I caught a few fish. I started catching a few smaller fish, and that kind of gave me the confidence to know that sooner or later, I was gonna find an area that the bass were at, and it's just a technique that I've used time and time again in the past to trigger inactive fish to bite. When you rip it out of that grass and they get it like that, it's just, you know they're not active. It's that quick flutter that gets them to bite. So that's why it's such a good good tool to trigger bass with. It's got the flat sides, makes that noise, and it's the right size of the bait. Just need to find a little bit better quality fish, but we're getting closer. Finding bait, I'm getting out on this deeper stuff. One of these spots like this is where you're gonna hit them and you're gonna get the mother lode. This time of the year, that mother lode spot, that's what you're looking for, and it was gonna happen. I knew eventually I would find it, and when I got that first good bite, I'm like, it's about to go down, and boy did it. God, I just got it. Good one, that's a big one. Big one. There's a big one, finally. God, I mean, you can tell when they're like that when they get it. I've got a full-grown one here. Well, we got him, Alan. Now that is more what we're looking for. Look at there. And you can see by the way that he got it, he was slashing at it when I ripped it up. I got him both hooks underneath the chin. Now that's a good one right there. Gotta be 6 pounds, not the... Awesome, we'll let him go. All I wanna do is get right back in there as fast as I can, because I know the faster I get in there, the better my chances to keep that school fired up and to catch some more big ones. You know, for this technique, I love this bait because it's really heavy for its compact size. You know, I've caught lots and lots of bass on a red eye shad, but this new tungsten version, you know, it's got that 2-tap type knocker in it, and it sinks more head first. It stays balanced and it shimmies, so you can snap it up and let it flutter down. So it's a great bait for structure fishing. What I've got is I've got 2 points coming together, and I got a wider open lake, and there's just like a 12-foot saddle between it, and it's 20 foot on both sides. So anytime there's you know, any wind or anything like that, it's going to move some current through there, and that's what these funnels these bigger fish into an area. It's a good feeding area. You know, I mean, you could probably throw some other baits through there to get them, but they're just so inactive. It's the middle of the day right now, so I'm gonna let it hit the bottom and kind of rip it up, and then just let it flutter back down. There he is, right there on the sink. Another good one too. It's so important when you're fishing this right here to follow that bait down. I want to let it sink, but not with a dead slack line. Oh, come here. He wants to get in the shade of the boat, and this one here has got it all the way down. Wow. Look at here. Look at how he got it. I mean, he really wanted that red eye. You know, he had it all the way down his throat. You know you're on the right program when that happens.
Line size is so important when you're fishing lipless crankbaits, especially trying to get them a little bit deeper. I had an experience down on Sam Rayburn with a good buddy of mine fishing a team tournament. We were fishing exactly the same color baits, same gear ratio reels, but we had different line. I had 14-pound fluorocarbon, he had 17-pound fluorocarbon, and I was catching all the fish right off the bat that morning. But as soon as he changed to 14-pound test, he was able to get his bait a little bit deeper like mine and started catching them immediately.
You know, I love fishing crankbaits, and you know, anytime that you can get on a deep bite like this, it's pretty special. You know, most people think of a lipless crankbait and they cast it out, burn it across the shallow flat, rip it out of shallow grass, but you can fish it in all depth zones. And I found the more you let this bait fall, and the way that it falls is it has that quiver to it, just they can't help it. So I got a spot, I've caught 2 big ones in a row. We got to get back in there and see if we can get another one out of it. One of the things that is just critical is using that, you know, fluorocarbon line. You know, I use the Bass Pro XPS fluorocarbon, and it just gives you such good feel. You got to be able to feel what that bait's doing. You got to be able to feel as it's fluttering down, as it's falling. And that fluorocarbon sinks, and it gives you that ultra sensitive feel because it's so low in stretch. It's just a must for crankbaits. So I'm letting it sink down. I've got just a semi-slack line. That bait stays balanced. Let it go all the way to the bottom till it stops. And just reel it up real fast and let it come down. you really need to let it sink with pretty much a slack line, and I've seen that from underwater footage. So if I let it sink with too much tension, it just falls straight. But if I let it sink with just a bow in my line, it has that full quiver. Got that natural shad pattern right here. That's what they're feeding on. I'm seeing balls of shad, so hopefully there's another one there. That's fun.
What I'm trying to do is experiment with different retrieves. I'm burning it with the reel and then letting it flutter. I'm hopping it with a rod. I'm doing different things, but definitely changing direction and changing the pace of that bait is what makes these fish react.
Not like those last ones, but still a quality fish. Look at here. You think he didn't want it? So you make your cast out there, good long cast. I'm gonna let it sink all the way to the bottom, and I'm watching my line as it's falling. Keep your eye on your line. Hits the bottom, start it up, and I just like to just reel it real fast to get that first start. And I'm gonna leave that bow in the line and just watch that bow. And that's what'll happen. When they get it like that, you'll just see it tick and just reel until it tightens up. So I love this composite rod, it's got graphite and glass, and it just reacts a little slower. Allows those fish to get it real well, but it's still ultra sensitive, and it's got a lot of power. So, I'm using a medium heavy action, helps me rip it out of that grass if I need to, if I'm around that grass. I've been doing a lot of that today. But more importantly, when you got those big fish on like that, they get the bait a lot better, and you don't lose hardly any at all. I've got it with my crankbait reel. You rip that rod a little bit, you speed that reel up, and boy, it just makes those fish just jump on it. Got him. Another good one. Oh man. It feels like a good one too. Oh. They always go for the shadow of that boat. Oh yeah, look at that. It's because he's hooked in the end of the nose. That's another 6-pounder. That's what you can find when you finally find them. It took a long time to cover a lot of water to get them, but you can see when you snap it up like that, they're just reacting to it. And I barely got him in the end of the nose right there, like that. But I had him. Pretty fish. Yep, pretty fish right there. Oh yeah, look at that fish. Oh yeah. So many times, I've seen it. If I find a school of fish offshore in any type of structure, whether it's Kentucky Lake and it's a ledge, or it's a deep grass line, I just know that, especially if they're relating to bait fish, that ripping that lipless crankbait triggers bass that won't bite anything else. So it's something I always keep in the back of my mind. We've been working on this tungsten version so we'd have a bait that's heavier to get down and stay down in those deeper depth zones. And it's just got that really loud, dramatic sound to it. Back in there again. Once you find a spot like that, it's what you really, what you really dream about. 3 6-pounders, back to back to back.
Not many days you go out and catch 3 fish over 6 pounds, on one of these shoots like this. It's just kind of a special day to be able to make it happen. So when you figure it out, come up with the right technique and the right lure and put it all together, yo-yoing this red eye shad is money.
Pretty fish.
One thing I've learned through the years that's really, really important piece of equipment in my boat is having a pair of clear sunglasses like this that I wear in low light conditions. Just keep those bugs, anything flying off the deck from hitting my eyes. You can see right there, it's got a couple bugs on it from the last time I wore it. But your eyes are so important, so valuable to your body. These right here is a must-have in my boat, having a pair of clear sunglasses to protect my eyes. When you go to buy a new rod and reel combo, it's really important that you get the right tool for the right job. So you want to have the right combination for the technique that you're going to use it for. Today, Davey Height's going to explain all in Bass School 101.
As a full-time Bassmaster Elite Pro, I have a lot of rod and reels, and I really don't have to pick and choose. I just kind of get all of them. Don't tell my wife that, but I do. Most people, that doesn't make any sense. You know, and at one time before I was a full-time fisherman, you know, I would really think about which combination I need and which one would be most valuable for me to be able to use it with multiple techniques. If you're just starting out, or maybe a child, maybe a beginning adult or a woman, I would definitely recommend the Carbon Light Spinning Rod, Pro Qualifier Reel, and this is the same combo that I use on the Bassmaster Tournament Trail. Caught fish on them this year in California, New York, and also in the Southeast. This is really easy to use. Throw shaky head, throw light tackle, throw top water, and you can also fish a worm or Texas rig, that sort of thing, on this combo. It also comes with extra spool. It's really cool about this. You know, you can have 6-pound tests on one spool, have the other spool in your pocket with 10 or 12-pound tests if you want to go to heavier stuff. So you basically got 2 combos because both spools come with the reel. The other combo, and if I had to just pick one, this would be at the Pro Qualifier Reel, 7-foot medium or medium heavy action micro guide rod, and it's just a great combination. You know, if you're only going to have 2 or 3 rods, this definitely needs to be one of them. Here's the difference between this and the spinning. You get more leverage with this reel on top of the rod, the bait caster, and I fish, you know, 1-ounce jigs, really heavy stuff with this bait caster combination. The trick is, though, for beginners especially, this bait caster is going to be a little harder to use until you get used to it. Professional overruns, we call them, or backlashes, bird nest. I call it sudden spool acceleration after you've won a Bassmaster Classic. Call it whatever you may. Just a little tougher to use. You know, I've seen 10-year-olds that can cast these things all day long. They're not that hard, but it takes a little more getting used to. So maybe start out with that spinning combination and go to this bait caster. And this same combination that I use, Edwin Ever used, Chris Lane used, several guys on the Bassmaster Tournament Trail. If you buy one of these 2, or maybe one of each, got you 2 rods and reels that you can fish heavy tackle on, light tackle, you'll be glad you did.